The next amendment is the 38th, lodged by Deputy Morell. Will I ask the greffier to read the amendment?
After the words, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words, except that A, the following should be inserted within the list of protected industrial sites in policy EI1, existing in new industrial sites and premises. 9, Bienvenue Farm and land adjacent, the Fenton Centre and the Hidden Garden Company, St Lawrence. B, within policy EI1, after the words built-up area will be supported, there should be inserted the following new paragraph. The development of new or the redevelopment, renewal or intensification of existing sites and premises at Bienvenue Farm and land adjacent, the Fencing Centre and the Hidden Garden Company will only be supported where it's for the purposes of warehousing and storage, or the nature of the proposed use will complement and support an existing rural business, or enables a new business that has the potential to make a significant contribution to the rural economy. Any such proposals must be accompanied by a business plan which justifies the location of the development and demonstrates its contribution to the rural economy. And C, within EI1, after the words in all cases of light industrial, there should be inserted the words / warehousing and storage / rural economy. D, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of paragraphs A to C.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Sir, before I start, I'd just like to bring members' attention to an email that I sent to all States members shortly before lunch, which gives you what I hope is a handy map of the site that we're talking about here. So, sir, this is a small amendment, but it's one that's aimed at filling what I see as a huge void in the Bridging Island Plan. And that void is actually the lack of employment land, and in this case, land for storage purposes. The lack of employment land, new employment land, and the lack of storage is, I can tell you, sir, harming the economy. This amendment seeks to enable storage at a clearly defined site. In the map that I provided to members, the site we are talking about is, or there are two sites. It is the one circled in yellow and the one circled in red. The purple and blue areas are already light industrial sites. I think what's important here, sir, is for members to understand that this is not about green fields. This is about areas which currently are already in a commercial use of one form or another. One of them, Bienvenue Farm, houses Scoop, the sustainable cooperative, and it houses a number of empty chicken sheds, because since the farm stopped being involved in agriculture, it's had redundant chicken sheds. And part of this is to bring those chicken sheds back into use. Unfortunately, at the moment, they can only be used as chicken sheds, but they have no chickens, so they're standing there redundant, sir. Members can see that whilst it is in industrial use, policy EL1 in the draft Bridging Island Plan requires existing buildings to be repurposed within their existing use. That's just not possible or feasible in this case, particularly for those chicken sheds. They cannot be reused as chicken sheds. We do need something else placed there, or we're letting a piece of land go which could be used very well within the economy, and we're just letting it remain empty and redundant. The Fencing Centre and Hidden Garden Company, circled in red, sir, have already had permission for data centres to be placed there. That was back in 2015. But because of the way the market and data centres changed, after the planning application, it became unfeasible to run that as a business. And so it's remained in a retail commercial use. And there is, whilst that is available at the moment and operates currently as a commercial centre, it is to have the option to move into storage should that be a better way forward. This amendment would enable the construction of units for low-intensity commercial use that support the rural economy. Again, sir, this is something that I believe the Bridging Island Plan does not do enough of, is support the rural economy, sir. The amendment has tight parameters, ensuring that support for the rural economy and the need for a business plan are provided in order to demonstrate the contribution that any change would make to the rural economy. Applications for such storage businesses would also likely be bound by conditions on hours of use. That is something which would be left to the planning process, but it is very likely, from my experience on the planning committee, that set hours of use would be conditioned on any storage units that were placed there. In his rejection of this amendment, the Minister cites the distance from Jersey's ports as an issue in terms of sustainable transport. This, to me, sir, seems to be something of a red herring. The site is on a main road, centrally located, meaning that whilst, yes, it could be closer to the ports, but it is in fact closer to all of their users or likely users. If this was sited in town, then this would be towards, yes, it would be closer to the ports, but the people accessing the storage would be travelling further to get to the storage from within the island. So I don't see, sir, that this is in any way against the sustainable, in any way not sustainable in terms of transport. The site is currently used, as I've said, for retail, and should it become predominantly storage, then it would surely see fewer vehicle journeys, something else which I see as being an argument against the Minister's rejection, sir. But I'm looking forward to hearing members' thoughts on this. It is unusual. It is a particular site. It is clearly bounded. There is no sense that this site would grow. It is a site that is on two sides, bordered by roads, one of them being St. Lawrence Main Road. And on the other site, it is by green fields, which would entirely remain green fields. There is no suggestion that they would not remain so. But, sir, the main reason for me bringing this is, as I have said, the need for storage units in Jersey, because businesses are struggling without them. And so I'd like to finish this opening speech by reading from a letter sent from a chartered surveyor, I just couldn't think of the word, sir, to the applicant with regard to the need for storage units. So, sir, he says, I thought it prudent to provide an update of the current market in Jersey to demonstrate the extreme need for commercial dry storage. Over the last 2 to 3 years, the demand for light industrial commercial dry storage units has dramatically increased, and it is fair to say demand substantially outstrips supply. Until recently, on our register, we had nothing of a commercial nature. However, as at today's date, we have 3 new instructions ranging up to 4,200 square feet of light industrial units, 2 of which, within the first week, had already gone under offer. The units on our register are quoting rentals from £12.50 per square foot up to £13 per square foot. That is a rise in rentals due to a lack of supply of 25% within the last 18 months. So we can see, sir, how the lack of supply of storage units is driving inflation in the island quite clearly, 25% in 18 months. Basic commercial dry storage units, which used to command £6 to £7 per square feet, have also dramatically increased and are closing in on £9 to £10 per square foot. This is simply a reflection of the shortage and supply of such units at this time. On this surveyor's light industrial commercial warehousing applicants register of 1 to 3,000 square feet, this surveyor, sir, currently has 32 requests from businesses for dry storage units. He concludes, sir, by saying the unit at Bienvenue Farm lends itself ideally for simple commercial dry storage and would certainly be of assistance to one of the many local companies that this surveyor is dealing with and knows are in need of this, sir. So I ask members to allow this amendment because it will provide a direct benefit to the economy. It will help local businesses. And, sir, it would do so in an area which has already been turned over to commercial and light industrial use. The area surrounds Thistle Grove, which is a light industrial site and is protected as a light industrial site within this Bridging Island plan, but it would enable the growth in that small defined area, sir. I look forward to hearing members and their thoughts on the matter. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Yes. Conor St Mary.
Thank you, sir. Many businesses in this island are desperate for open storage and also dry storage. It has been left to the private sector to provide this. Once again, as with housing, demand exceeds supply, so rental costs go up to reflect this. Very often farmers retiring from agriculture apply for change of use in order to utilise their redundant agricultural buildings. Most are successful, which helps the situation, but there still is a great lack of storage, so costs are high, which adds to inflation. The states actually need to provide facilities in order to stabilise costs, and there are still opportunities at La Collette if the will is there to do this. If we don't allow change of use for storage in the private sector, all we are doing is stifling business and inflating costs. We have a building problem for first-time buyer housing, and we also have a problem with lack of storage. These things have to be addressed rather than hoping that they miraculously fix themselves unattended. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Tarr. Conor Tarr of St John.
Thank you, sir. So I'm pleased to support this amendment. As we've just heard, there's currently high demand for on-island warehousing and storage space, probably higher than at any time since the demise of the fulfilment industry on the island. There are a few contributing factors to this: the removal of former warehousing space from the market, and probably an unintended consequence, but a consequence nevertheless, of the new cannabis businesses that have or intend to start up locally. So, reading the Minister's comments about the distance from the port, I was reminded last night of the JCRA report completed some time ago. In fact, I had to look back. It was completed in 2006. Yes, 2006. The JCRA was talking about the challenges with warehousing space, in particular around the ports. A 38,000 square foot warehouse was due to be built to free up existing warehousing, and members may be surprised, but despite having been granted all the permissions necessary, that this hasn't been built to this day. The result, the port's warehousing remains a pressure cooker, and it expands, putting pressure on other areas around the island. Ports answer to the shortage of available storage around the ports. They want to become a property developer, not provide the facilities that are desperately needed. We're seeing retail operations appear in former warehouses, and a combined result of Brexit and COVID has seen some local businesses increase their storage requirements. The result of the increased demand and reduction in supply has seen the cost of warehousing increase dramatically in recent years, even outstripping housing increases. And I think the numbers quoted by Deputy Morrell are conservative, sir, as I have seen some more significant increases. If we go back 10 years to 2012, landlords were concerned as to what was going to replace fulfilment, and some leaseholders also concerned as to how they could get out of existing leases. The Avenue Farm is an area that has potential to supply some of the demand. Sadly, the chances of finding a local youngster willing and brave enough to enter agriculture being remote. With my logistics background, access to Bienvenue from the main road with a wide entrance, I have no trouble in supporting its use for this purpose. The hidden garden and fencing centres are served by a parish by-road, and whilst both sites are able to receive 8-metre trailers, it is difficult to access down a narrow lane. The area itself would be suited to storage and warehousing. I would be more cautious about supporting this second area unless access can be gained from either the farm and or through Thistle Grove. There are enough safeguards in place mentioned by Deputy Morrell for me to support the amendment. It's interesting that we're seeing businesses open sub-depots in the west, particularly in the construction industry, following demand from customers who want to save time and money by not driving in and out of town. So there is a demand for out-of-town storage, and we need to be able to provide it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Conor St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. And I'm interested to speak on this amendment and also the fact that it came up in the 2010 debate, as I recall, and in all truth, sir, I believe we voted on it. I can't honestly remember how I voted, but it's interesting that it's coming up again. And it's quite clear in the report, sir, that the planning inspector at that time supported it, but states members didn't. So maybe we can change our views. It's quite logical, looking at the map, sir, that it should be included. It backs on to Thistle Grove, and in reference to ports just made by the previous speaker, I do recall that the two long white buildings on the centre of the site were actually used at one point for a yacht building, which is about as far away from the port as you can imagine, and that was a successful business called Blue Water Yachts for many years. So for my part, sir, I can see no reason not to support the proposal, and we'll be happy to do so this time, even if I didn't in 2010. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, sir. I absolutely accept there is an issue of, first of all, industrial land generally, but certainly warehousing. The plan at the moment has not designated any new sites, and I will return to that in a moment, what possibilities there are of being able to look at that. But what we've got here is a site which is already to the north of the site, having industrial complex, i.e. the Thistle Grove. Obviously now the proposal is to very, very substantially increase it in size. That would be the consequences of going with this amendment. And although I think the proposition talks about rural uses, support the rural economy, I think, from the advice that I've got, that would be, I think, difficult to manage and control. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but of course I think we have to view this as creating a much larger industrial area, which is in a fairly isolated position. So the need is there. The deputy is, there's no question, everything members said so. So how, at the moment, does the plan provide to try and provide for this? First of all, it tries to protect the existing sites that we have. So these would not be enabled or encouraged to go into other uses, although I certainly believe there will be time to time there will be pressure for that to happen. Allows and encourages the intensification of industrial development on those protected sites and at light industrial premises also. And also within the built-up area, the plan allows flexibility for the creation of those sites, those uses. So there are tools in the plans to bring those about. Also, I think we have a large number of very large modern agricultural buildings in the island. These are obviously what we find if agriculture changes, and from time to time those sheds become available for applications for reuse. In fact, I can recall some applications coming in for development of conversion into homes and what have you. But at the moment, the policies we have do allow those sheds to be used for that sort of storage use. But of course, there has to be a situation where the location is such that the vehicles, the traffic, as the Constable of St John told us, it's absolutely vital that they are sited in places where vehicles of the size that service these premises can access safely, and they don't impact unreasonably on the surrounding area and where there are issues of noise. Time to time we get noisy warehouses. Generally speaking, I don't think that's a general situation, but there are very famous cases, well-known cases of more noisy warehousing activities, but I think that's not really a factor here. And so what also we have, a number of pieces of work which I think are going to look at how we can meet this need. And the island plan includes an island planning framework, including the airport, and indeed an infrastructure roadmap, which I think this is where the Deputy of St Mary is absolutely spot on about La Colette. Members may not know that in the history of land reclamation in St Helier, more enlightened governments or members or committees in those days actually set aside areas of land in La Colette and entered into agreements with private owners to build this very type of facility. Members may not know that that's how the units which are sited next door to the motor traffic department were built. There's 6 major warehousing industrial storage units there, and also planning facilitated the buildings beyond that, which is where Romrul's warehousing and so on, all those sites there. And I see no reason why. I really feel very, very strongly that we are not taking our opportunities at La Colette for the land created to be used going forward for this type of use, where we should set aside, instead of trying to squeeze in these smaller sites, but do something very substantial for continued success of this business activity, which is crucial. And that is why the plan provides what we've called an infrastructure roadmap, which is frankly about the future of that site, La Colette. I don't think we can continue with a policy that I hope the Minister doesn't take this critical. I've always described as our engineering backyard. We've got all that land, we should think about how we might use it for this sort of use. That can't be done now. That's going to take the island plan proposal to go through. And so where we finish what we have, the Deputy Morell does see, and there is clearly an opportunity here. We've got some worn out chicken sheds which are adjacent to an existing protected industrial site. And the question, I think, for members is, do you want to see that area substantially double in size? And with it, the amount of traffic, the amount of comings and goings, and the change in the nature of that area. The planning inspectors were asked to look at that, and they concluded, we consider that there is a need for further industrial sites, but this is not an appropriate location for such consolidation. And so with that examination of the issues, and it's not a position I feel I have to comfortably take, because I recognise the need. But at the moment, I think that once here we've got a site which is in a rural setting, there's no question about it. Do we want to make another one into a much larger complex, or would we prefer to put our efforts into trying to find better alternatives, which I believe we've got the opportunities to do? So with those kind of mixed feelings, I'm not going to be able to support Deputy Morell's amendment, but he's absolutely right to bring it here and address this issue of the need for industrial warehousing facilities in the island. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister.
So may I ask a point of clarification of the Speaker?
If you'll give way to do so, will you agree to answer a clarification point, Minister?
Beg your pardon, I was having a rest.
Will you
Sorry.
accept a point of clarification?
Yes, I will, sir. Thank
You
you.
will, yes.
I can do it later if you want to rest, I understand.
Deputy Ward.
It's just I may be being a bit of a pedant here. It strikes me that the amendment is about warehousing and storage alone. The inspector's report, the summary report which we're looking at and what you're saying here talks about industrial activity, and I just wonder whether the Minister can say whether he feels that the report is directly addressing warehousing and storing, or is it sort of widening the issue into manufacture, light manufacture and so on, because I think it's a bit of a confusion for me, because there are two very different things. I hope that is a point of clarification, sir, but I think there is a point to be made there. I hope the Minister understands what I'm asking. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I will. I think I will. If the deputy would agree, while the debate continues, I will promise to come back to a more thorough explanation as to where the boundaries of different types of industrial uses are.
Well, you can't speak again.
Well, I'll try and do my best off the top of my head. Where we use at the moment spare redundant agricultural buildings, we apply a condition that only allows what we call storage and called dry storage, if you like, which minimises the amount of comings and goings on those sites to reduce the impact on adjacent premises. Light industrial, I think the best example I can think of light industrial is a famous one, and I'm sure the Constable St Peter will know this very well, St Peter's Technical Park, where we have a lot more activity with the light industrial, where, I think members will know that that site, as an example, St Peter's Technical Park, we have seen intensification of those uses in recent years. They probably started off as fairly benign uses and then have grown in intensity and of course have given rise to issues, and I make no comments about the merits of those, but they've certainly given rise on adjacent residential properties where the Constable of St Peter has given enormous assistance to try and help deal with that. But there's no question, when you get that sort of light industrial, it does impact on surroundings, and so So that's, I think, my best attempt at an answer at the moment. I have to regard this as that if we go with this, we are going to have a very significant expansion of an light industrial activity in this area. Thank you.
Clarification is also sought, Minister, by Deputy Tadia of something that you have said.
Thank you, sir. So I've just put a note in. I don't need that now. I can withdraw that request. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Higgins has sought clarification of something you said, Minister. Deputy Higgins.
Yes, thank you, sir. In fact, I was going to speak on this, but the clarification can help. If we look at the photograph that's been circulated by Deputy Morell, in the top left of the yellow marked area, which is, you've got the two white roofs, and then just to the right of it, so in the top left of the photograph, there is a family unit. And I'm not sure about the one further down below the industrial unit, about halfway down the little leg. Looks like a farmhouse. Can the Minister tell us whether consideration was given about those family or residential units? I believe that the one used in the top left-hand corner is used by someone who works on the site. Perhaps he can clarify that to us as well, please. And whether the impact on those people has been considered.
Sir, point of order, sir.
We'll come at it. Does that arise from anything that you've said, Minister?
I'm a bit struggling with this, sir. I can't get my drawing of the plan up. But, I mean, I have been reminded that, of course, the fencing centre, which is on the northwest corner of this site...
Sir, point of order, sir.
Point of order, yes.
The point of order is, sorry, sir, that none of anything Deputy Higgins said was mentioned in the speech by
Yes.
by the Minister.
I think that's right.
And the other point of order was the Minister seemed to be about to embark on another speech, sir, rather than clarifying something which wasn't in his speech.
Because the Minister didn't deal with that in his speech. Conor St Mary.
Sir, point of clarification there, because the Minister did mention the St Peter site and the problems with the related properties. So surely it is relevant in this case. Thank you.
Well, no, it's not a clarification of what he said under Standing Order 101 and my interpretation of the same. Thank you. Yes,
thank you, sir. It was only to correct the Minister, sir. He referred to me as the Deputy of St Mary rather than the Constable. But it's just to put the record straight.
Yes, I'm not sure that's a point of clarification either, but thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I have a point of order. It's Deputy Tadeo.
Yes, Tadeo? Yes.
It's a more general point of order. There seems to have been a series of rulings that have grown up whereby we wait till the end of somebody's speech for points of clarification. But I think what's the parliamentary norm, it has been in Jersey and it is elsewhere in the Commonwealth, is that you can ask a member to give way when they're speaking to take an intervention, which is usually to clarify or just to help with a point of information whilst that person is still speaking, and of course when they can still decide whether or not to give way, sir. And
yes. What's the point of order that you're raising?
So the point I'm making, sir, is that it would seem to me that Deputy Higgins doesn't need to have to be addressing a point that the Minister made when asking for clarification, because what should happen is that a member should just be able to ask the Minister to comment on something which is relevant, I think, and it's up to the Minister to then decide whether he wants to take that intervention. And I don't know if that's something you can rule on now, but I think it's certainly something that needs to be considered about processes, because it seems to be silly to wait till somebody's spoken and they can't effectively give way when they've already finished speaking. That's the point I'm making, sir.
No, Dr. I need to be clear and to, in a sense, rule against you in relation to this. Points of order aren't, points of clarification aren't under Standing Order 101 available in order to ask questions of someone during their speech. They are for the purposes set out in Standing Order 101C. It's if the member speaking agrees to give way in order to explain any material part of his or her own speech, that's the person who's asking the question, or in order to ask the member speaking to elucidate a matter raised in his or her speech. So it's only to ask, in this context, members who have not yet spoken, asking questions of the Minister. The only purpose of an interruption under Standing Order 101 is to ask the member speaking to elucidate a matter raised in his or her speech. You're right, Deputy Tadeo, that an interruption, if the member agrees to give way, can be made at any time in the course of the speech, but a matter of courtesy, it's generally helpful, but not always required, or indeed required at all, to leave it until the end of the speaker's speech.
Thank you.
Deputy Higgins, you wish to speak now.
Thank you, sir. And I don't know if Deputy Morell was being defensive with his point of order. The point is, I am neither for or against this particular site and what he's proposing. At the moment, I'm listening to the case. But I do know that the top left-hand corner of that site is a residential unit, which has a family. And I believe the person who occupies it, I think, works on the site. There also appears to be a farmhouse. If we look at the dogleg of the photograph, it looks like a granite farmhouse just below the main unit at the top right. All I want to do is find out, are there residential units on the site? What is the implication of that? Are those people going to be allowed to carry on there? In which case, what impact will it have on them? And secondly, are they going to be driven off the site because of its change of use? I just want to know some information. So I would ask the Deputy, when he sums up, to provide that information. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Lewis, was your light on?
Indeed, sir. Thank you, sir. Very briefly, sir, I would agree with Deputy Morell that storage is desperately needed in the island, but I would also agree that light industrial must be kept well away as much as possible from residential units. I have a problem at the moment. I am legally obliged to provide a PTI or periodic test inspection, or if you like, MOT centre, but finding suitable sites is extremely difficult. And more than happy to work with the Minister of Planning and Environment to source a site. So he did mention La Colette, which for various reasons is not suitable at the moment, but I look forward to La Colette being recategorised, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak? Yes, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. It's a well, it's not clarification, but we seem to be getting down a line where we've done this in a number of debates recently, where this amendment does appear to me to be saying that these specific sites, and I'm quite happy to be corrected, sir, if I'm wrong, will be developed, supported only for the purpose of, I'm trying to see the rather large paragraph now, warehousing and storage. So therefore, to talk about light industrial is a different thing. Because, and I'll make it very simple. If this was another St. Peter's industrial park development, I would be voting absolutely against it, because I don't think, because I know of the issues that are around there, and I've been approached by people who live there, even though I'm not a deputy for that area. And I know it's been a very, very difficult situation, and it is not, I would say, perhaps even using parliamentary privilege here, and say it's not working very well at times. And there are real issues around the area. But I don't see that as this. I see this as a different issue of what the deputy has done is found a bit of land around some areas and looked at the issue of the lack of warehousing and storage, which isn't going to be solved anytime soon by the Colette, because there are no real joined up plans to do that, I don't think, not that we've seen anyway. And said, well, look, this is an area where you could have storage, repurpose the chicken sheds, that's a word that's been used more than anyone would have thought today, and repurpose it for a specific area. But what we seem to be doing is going down a debate of light industrial work. Now, I would like to have the nature of warehousing, because if warehousing is simply storage that repeatedly vans will be, during all hours of the day, would arrive at in order to pick up goods and then go on their way, I may well have an issue with that. But in terms of storage and using those for that, it's a different issue, I think. I mean, that's why I asked the clarification of the Minister to find out the difference between those terms, because I think for many of us, they're not my special, it wouldn't be my mastermind specialist subject, the difference between storage and light industrial, to be quite frank. So it would be nice to know that that is the case, and just get this debate on the track of talking about what the facility will actually be, and whether the massive increase in traffic that the Minister seems to be suggesting is a reality, or whether it's, again, a bit of a red herring. Because, and finally, sir, and this is a difficult one put together because we've been trying to look at the report as well. The report from the inspectors did, I think, verge into that light industrial usage as much as anything. And it makes it very difficult for us as an assembly to make a decision if the proposition is about one thing and the report and the Minister is talking about something else. Because I think that happened, personally, I think that happened in the marine park. We got way off topic and we're talking about fishing rights, which was completely separate to the issue itself. And we just lost track of that debate. So I make a plea, can we please get back onto what we're talking about in this debate so that we know specifically what it's going to be used for. And if it is for warehousing and storage, I don't think I have that much of an issue with that, because it's not developing on green land. There is already some sort of facility there which is probably going to be derelict and need to be sorted out before it gets an eyesore. And it might be a useful thing to do as a temporary measure before we sort out other storage on the island, which I will add, I think with the changing world, we will need, because we need to have some sort of food security into the future, and we may need to look again at our storage facilities that were taken away, and not simply, for example, in some areas of town, particularly in my districts, one area that was developed into housing, and that storage is now gone. So we need to look really carefully at what we're doing with that. So that's the issue I think that I come across with this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Peter.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to ask the Deputy, when he sums up, to the right of the Thistle Grove industrial marker, there seems to be a residential home. If that's the same home that Deputy Higgins was trying to point out, I apologise, but I don't think it was. My only question is, has the Deputy consulted with the owners of that home as to the changes that he is recommending to us today? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conotaba St One.
Thank you, sir. I know this area quite well for the very reason that my father, when he was practising, had boats built in this area by Sylvia Yates. So this will not be the first time that this area has been used for an activity other than storage. And it is large, and there's plenty of space. And the other point that was made about access to the road, well, I don't think we should forget that road is used by Rona every day. They transport aggregate from their quarry largely down to town. So it's a decent-sized road, there's plenty of access, and I can't see how additional traffic from this site would actually cause a problem. And in fact, actually, a lot of those sites, a lot of the buildings in that area fall into disuse, and this is exactly why I'm sure the Deputy is proposing it to be reactivated. And certainly when I lived in St Lawrence, it was a very busy area, there were lots of traffic going in and out. And so I can't see that actually what the Deputy is proposing is going to make a lot of difference in actual fact to what's been there in the past. And the other thing I would say, if you look carefully at the map, those houses that have been there for a while, and they've got used to what goes on in that area, and it has been a busy area. And let's be honest, some of them are next door to chicken sheds. I don't know if you've ever lived next door to a chicken shed, but chickens aren't the quietest birds on the planet, especially when they're being fed. So they will be used to a certain degree of noise there as well. So they're well shielded by trees. The residents will be well aware of noise coming from that site. So I fully support the Deputy's proposition. And actually, I was quite shocked, if I'm really honest, having known the site for many years, that actually these provisions didn't exist in the first place. So from my point of view, I should definitely be supporting this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conotard. Does any other members to speak? Yes, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. I think this. I rise in support of the Deputy Morell's amendment. So I think this is one for a little bit of common sense, given the fact that we've just come out of a hugely challenging economic time with Brexit and pandemic, and during that time, small businesses, which are as members will know, the sort of lifeblood of the economy, have suffered perhaps more than any body. And what we've seen as a result of that is a lot of restructuring of business, a lot of innovation, new businesses emerging, people who have islanders who have lost their jobs, rethinking their lives and starting to do things for themselves. And the Deputy is absolutely right when he says there is an acute lack of storage, not so much big warehousing, but small storage facilities enough just to facilitate very small businesses, either startups or businesses, actually looking to perhaps downsize, restructure. And I think we will see some substitution of businesses who have decided to do that and look for smaller storage facilities. And these are very low impact, low intensity units that we're seeing the demand for at the moment. And we do have a propensity to sort of try and catastrophize the outcomes of certain debates. We see it a lot. I mean, the standard position for some, sir, is if one's against something, is to create an apocalyptic scenario if it gets passed. Well, of course, that's not going to happen. We really do need, sir, now more than ever, some small storage units, and I would urge members or ask members to support the Deputy on this occasion, because it's really important that we lay some foundations now to build the economy, especially for the smaller businesses. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. Conotaba St Lawrence.
Thank you, sir. I remember the debate in 2010, I think we've been reminded of today, for the 2011 Island Plan. And at that time, there was a proposal involved for the expansion of the Thistlegrove Light Industrial Estate. And without any doubt, had that been approved at the time, we would have had another Rue des Prés trading estate in the middle of the green zone in St Lawrence. And I believe that that is why members voted against it, notwithstanding, as we've been told today by the Constable of St Brelade, that the planning inspector at that time apparently supported the rezoning to increase the size of the light industrial. This amendment to the Bridging Island Plan causes me far less concern than the proposal did in 2010, having heard what the Minister for the Economy has said, having listened to what Deputy Morel, his Assistant Minister, has said when proposing this amendment. And of course the amendment does include in it the wording that any such proposals must be accompanied by a business plan which justifies the location of the development. So I'm comforted by that, notwithstanding that for this amendment, the planning inspector did not support the rezoning of this area. As a member of the planning committee, I have visited other green zone areas where we have been asked to consider converting agricultural buildings, defunct sheds, maybe defunct chicken sheds, to light storage. Not, I would say, warehousing as the title of this amendment is, but to light storage facilities. And I have voted in accordance, when determining those applications, I voted in accordance with the current Island Plan policy, which is not to support the development of those, or the redevelopment of those areas into light storage. However, this doesn't give me a problem, and I'm prepared to support it, notwithstanding having heard the comments of the Minister and his recommendations that we don't support it, and bearing in mind, of course, that Le Collet was set up for this type of activity in the first place. And I think maybe when we look at the island plan, the proper island plan, if I can refer to it that way, then that's something that we would need to look at. It would be the use, certainly, of Le Collet and the way we utilise that land at the moment. So I'm happy to support my deputy on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable. Deputy Taddia.
Thanks, sir. I'm picking up on the last point about Le Collet. It doesn't seem to make sense to me that what the Minister said, that we should have like a centre where all of the storage is in Jersey. I mean, if you're based in and around St John, St Lawrence area, and you want to move your stuff and store it and near the fencing centre, it's got to be much better, hasn't it? If it's to do with agriculture and your fields are nearby, or whatever the storage is related to, you don't want to be having to drive to La Collet all the time and then back out into the countryside with all the disruption and the wear and tear on the road and the carbon emissions. I think we need to have sensible and adequate storage throughout the island. I've looked at the map here with the benefit of Google Maps. You can zoom in and out, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere as far as you can be in Jersey, and it doesn't seem as if it's going to have any negative impact. And my last point is, and I don't mean this to sound glib, sir, but it is quite right that it's incumbent on the deputy to make sure that it doesn't have any adverse effects on the neighbours. But it's his problem at the end of the day. If this turns out to be another St Piers industrial estate, and some of us know about the fallout that's happened from that, well, it's going to be in the deputy's district. So if there are any complaints to be made, they can come knocking on his door or ringing on his bell, provided they're polite with him, of course. So as long as the deputy's done his homework, I think we go with him, because what the minister said, it didn't sound like the minister was putting up that much resistance, and this is probably one that should have simply been accepted.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir. And the Minister seeks to resist this amendment, although not too strongly, by quite rightly saying that there's policy that allows for the intensification of existing units. But I would say to him, sir, that this example of St Peter's Technical Park is a classic one where the intensification has taken place already and the problems are coming from that. And I would say to the Minister, I think the sites already zoned have been intensified thus far, and there's very little scope for further work. The Minister, quite rightly, sir, mentions La Collette, and I wholeheartedly agree with him. There's a site there that has to be made much better use of. But the problem, sir, that the Minister has to face, and it's just as well we have the 3-4 years of this draft island plan to work on it, is that we have to get over the issues of Buncefield at La Collette. Any time you propose anything half sensible at La Collette, somebody says, no, we can't do that because of Buncefield. And we really need to get our heads around what we're doing with the fuel farm in order to make best use of this reclaimed land at La Collette. So I think in the meantime, in the years that it's going to take to develop the policy for La Collette, the Minister quite rightly is going to do, I think the use of this site as proposed by the Deputy is probably not too bad. In some ways I'm a little disappointed in as much as the top half of the fencing centre site is still very green, could be returned to agriculture, and the western side of the Bienvenue farm site is in polytunnel, sir, which could very easily be returned to a green field. And so there are some parts of these two proposed areas which I think could have been returned to agriculture in exchange for the conversion of use on these sheds. But it's too late for that. The Deputy's lodged his amendment. And I think on balance, sir, I'm going to support it because I don't agree. The Minister mentioned the word isolation. I don't think this is an isolated site. It's certainly passed by some of the largest trucks in Jersey on a regular basis. It's got good access. I accept that the north access is more of a lane than a main road, but I'm sure we'll find ways to get around that. So as I said, sir, on balance, I'm prepared to go with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. No other members to speak. I call upon the Deputy to reply. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir, and I'd like to thank everybody who spoke in that. And I will first of all address Deputy Higgins, if that's okay, sir. Just to make clear, no, I was absolutely not trying to be offensive to Deputy Higgins at all. I was just being a stickler for process, sir, and realised that his point of clarification wasn't a point of clarification. That was all I was trying to say. He quite rightly then, in his speech, discussed the issue that was of concern to him, and that was the correct place to do it. And so in response to Deputy Higgins, it's important, those residential units, sir, are not on this site. They're not part of this site. They're not being affected. No one's being evicted. No one's being thrown out of this site. The areas in concern in the red and the yellow areas are entirely owned. They're the bits we're talking about. They're entirely owned by the people who live there. And indeed, the building in the middle is also owned by the people who own those sites. So they aren't an issue. Something I would like to bring up, and Deputy Taddia, quite rightly, I have to own this. It's essentially what Deputy Taddia was saying, and he is quite right. I think most members over the last 4 years have probably come to realise that I would never countenance an industrial park in terms of Rue de Pré or St Peter's Technical Park in St Lawrence. That's not something that I would ever stand by, and if I thought that this was going to lead to that, I would not bring this amendment at all, sir. But there is another level of security other than just my own analysis, which is, whilst we are discussing this for the island plan, sir, if we accept this amendment, it is only within the island plan. It only becomes part of an enabling policy. Planning permission still needs to be granted. So any storage units that are proposed here, sir, have to go through the planning process. We're not delivering planning permission here now today. And so, sir, if I felt that whatever planning applications that came forward were inappropriate and were perhaps taking it towards a Rue des Prés or something like this, I would absolutely be the first person to object to them, sir. I can assure members of that. This is, as Deputy Ward asked, this is about light storage units. This is not about creating an industrial estate. It is about responding to a need in the island and also responding to an area of land that is built up, that is already used. It is not, as we are going to debate for housing greenfields, this is, whilst not for housing, it is an area that is not greenfield, that it is currently built on, that isn't going back to being a field at any point, and it won't ever go back to being a field, sir. So it is about trying to make most efficient use of the land at our disposal, which is something that I think we need to do in this island. We need to become better at using the land that we have. Councillor St Mary is absolutely right that currently the lack of storage is stifling business, and it is inflating costs. These costs are going straight into the pockets of our consumers, as in coming out of the pockets of our consumers, our islanders. And so anything we can do, I believe we do have a moral obligation to try to reduce costs in this island, and this will be one small part of helping to do that, sir. The Constable of St John, quite rightly, Rue de la Marbalam is in St John, and yes, Rue de la Selleterie further along, but it's St Lawrence. It changes name, I believe, as things go on. I know it is Rue de la Selleterie to the north, the road to the north. Any access down via that route would be determined through the planning process. And obviously, as I know from my experience in the planning process, is that there would be very clear obligations as regard entrances and things like this. But this is already in use as a retail outlet, sir. The fencing centre is a retail outlet. The Hidden Garden Company is a retail outlet. So there are already traffic going that 100 metres or so down that road as it is. Bienvenue Farm entirely accessed via the main road. And I'm sure the two different owners of those two areas could actually look at perhaps providing access solely from the main road. But again, that would be dealt with through the planning process. I have a note with regard to the Constable of St Brillard's statement, but I don't understand my note. So I do apologise. I've said it's likely that it was still an agricultural use at the time. Oh, this is referring to 2010, and I think it probably was an agricultural use at the time as well, whereas the chicken farm that was there has long closed down, and so it's no longer an agricultural use. But Scoop, the cooperative, does use that area, and so it is in retail use again. This is an area that is accessed by people on a daily basis, including myself. I like to shop there, and I usually drive there, which I shouldn't. I should cycle, but I do, and people do drive and access that area already. To the Minister, he's right about La Collette. We all agree about La Collette. The trouble is La Collette's just not happening. And I think Deputy St Martin's absolutely right about the incident in the UK that has caused bigger concerns about safety concerns about the fuel farm. And one of the greatest frustrations, I have a good friend who is an artisan in this island and has had a real struggle for workshop space. And he has come to me saying, why can't I have workshops at La Collette? Why aren't there workshops at La Collette for small artisan businesses in Jersey to have that sort of space? And the answer is, ask the infrastructure minister. Right, so the answer is, as Deputy St Martin said, and the infrastructure minister is nodding, is because of that fire hazard, sir. But it is a huge frustration. We need to sort it out. And so to the minister, the environment minister, his objection seems to be very much based on, well, we're going to do La Collette. But that's at some unknown point in the future, sir. There is absolutely no time frame on that whatsoever. We have a problem today, as I said from the letter from the Chartered Surveyor, 25% price rise in dry storage units in the last year or 18 months. And the promise of something in the future at an unknown point versus prices which are rising today, this is in my mind, and it's the reason I brought this is one small opportunity to provide a bit of the solution. It's not the whole solution, but it's a bit of the solution. And you know, that's why I have brought this here today. It's really important that people understand this is about low intensity. This is about dry storage. It is not about creating an industrial estate. And I would, you know, object personally to any industrial estate type situation going on there. But the owners of Bienvenue Farm have no intention of removing Scoop. They want Scoop to be there. It's really good. So they're not looking to suddenly change the site completely. It's about them being able to use things like the empty chicken sheds, put a dry storage unit on there in their place, so that the land is brought into efficient use. So I'd like to thank other speakers, Deputy Ward, Deputy Hewlin, Constable of St. Juan, Senator Farnham, and of course the Constable of St. Lawrence. I understand the concern again 10 years ago, but I do believe this is a different proposition and a different amendment. And so, sir, I ask, in the interests of the economy, the interests of efficient land use in Jersey, I do ask that members support this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Do you ask the appel? Is the appel called for? The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link may cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Thank you. I now can announce that the amendment has been adopted. 40 votes pour, 2 votes contra.
We could have the two, please, sir.
Yes.
The 2 votes contra were Deputies Young and Pershard.
Now move to the 28th amendment, lodged by Deputy Morell. I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, after the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except at A within policy ERE3, conversion or reuse of traditional farm buildings. In the 4th paragraph, after the words appearance of the building, add the words or changing or affecting the employment use or the nature of surrounding agricultural land. B, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent upon the adoption of paragraph A.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir, and I apologise to those States members who thought by perhaps accepting the last amendment they wouldn't hear from me again today, but I'm sorry, I'm straight back up on my feet. This should be a shorter one. This is an amendment which is very much focused on making sure that when we take traditional agricultural buildings, so those agricultural buildings which tend to have a heritage value, whether it's a formal heritage value in that they're listed, or whether it's just a heritage value in that they're an old, perhaps 19th century Jersey farm, but they're being taken out of that agriculture use and they're being turned into something else, because the island plan supports things such as traditional farm buildings and heritage buildings being used for tourism. And obviously we know that traditional farm buildings are often used for residential purposes. This is purely about saying that any agricultural land that immediately surrounds that building, that may well be in the ownership of the people who own that farmhouse, that agricultural land cannot also be turned into something to service that hotel or to service those self-catering apartments. And so I'm thinking in particular things like car parks. We had an application in St. Lawrence for a traditional agricultural building to be turned into tourism use, and areas outside it were to be used for other purposes, including campsite, including car parking. And for me, that's not acceptable. I understand that where there isn't an agricultural use anymore for the building itself, you find another use for it. That I understand. But the agricultural land around it, even if it is owned by the same owners, should remain in agriculture. And if it isn't to remain in agriculture, if they do want to build a car park there or some other use there, then they should have to apply for that change of use and go through that process. So it's very open. And so this is entirely aimed at just making sure there isn't a snipping away at agricultural land that surrounds traditional farm buildings. Now, really, and this is why I don't want to labour any points here, the Minister's objection to my amendment is very much it's unnecessary. We've got land controls, we've got other policies which stop this from happening. I'm not convinced that those controls are enough. I've seen people turning fields into gardens. I've seen that happening all around the island. I've seen it happening whilst I've been on the planning committee. So I don't think that's strong enough. That's why I would like to put this here. I don't think there's any harm in putting this in here, even if it is, as the Minister says, unnecessary. I don't see any harm in doing this. It just restates the fact that where traditional agricultural buildings are taken out of agriculture, the surrounding land remains in agriculture. So in the hands of the Assembly, I don't expect a long debate on this one. Is it necessary or not necessary? The members should decide. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the amendment seconded? Thank you. Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, sir. To speed things up, sir, the Deputy is absolutely right. That was the only grounds for my saying they reject it, that there are other policies, but I'm happy to speed things up and say I'm now able to accept the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Lehegaray, do you still wish to speak?
Yes, sir. It was just really to declare the fact that I could potentially have an interest, as I own a quarter share of a property which is a Grade 3 listed and it has agricultural land attached to it.
Yes, I don't think that precludes you from voting or taking part in the debate there. I don't think that precludes you from taking part in the debate or voting. Thank you. Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. Just for clarification, I happen to own a small field adjoining a building, and some years when we bought the property, we bought it subject to the usual restriction that that field could not be used for any purpose other than agriculture. Some years ago, without any prompting from ourselves, the Environment Department came along and more or less requested or asked that they release that restriction. So I simply wish to make the point so that the Environment themselves are suggesting that smaller plots, small areas of land might no longer be subject to agriculture use, and they appear in the past to have facilitated the withdrawal of that restriction. And I wish to make that clear.
Thank you. Yes. Anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Kida.
Yes, sir. Of course, I will follow my minister if he has decided to accept this. But in general terms, I've been dealing a lot with legislation in the past few months, and I would like to remind members that duplicating legislation or policy doesn't make it more precise. It doesn't enhance it. It tends to make it fuzzier because you're just repeating something with different words, and actually you have to broaden the interpretation because of the superposing meanings. So we're going to accept this as the minister suggested, but it's not a good idea to keep duplicating policy or legislation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. We've got another classic example of such a site, Warren Farm on Noirmont. This is part of the Noirmont War Memorial, and actually has been envisaged to provide a starter farm for some youngsters who would like to go into farming, although there has been pressure to try and take the building itself out of farming, which is not the whole idea. You know, particularly, as I say, it's part of a war memorial. So I'm very much in favour of this amendment of Deputy Morell, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Senator. Does any of them wish to speak on this amendment? If not, then I invite the Deputy to reply. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir, and I apologise for jumping so quickly that I forgot to get it seconded earlier, but thank you for overlooking that. I'd just like to thank the Minister for accepting it. I'd also like to thank Deputy Guida. I will bear his words in mind if I'm ever developing policy or legislation in the future, because I'm sure he's right. But I would just move this straight to a vote, sir, for the expediency's sake. Thank you, sir.
And I will
Is the
second
appel
it.
called for?
I will second it, sir.
Thank you, yes. The appel has been called for. I invite members to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel, and I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. If more members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. Thank you. And I can announce that the amendment has been adopted. 41 votes for and 1 vote contra.
The vote contra is the Constable St Mary.
Next is the 61st Amendment lodged by Senator Moore, and I ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, after the words the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words except that A within policy RE6, after the words will not be supported, there should be inserted the words except where a commercial glasshouse site is located in close proximity to existing settlements and utility services, in which instance no more than 50% of that site will be supported for the provision of affordable housing, with use of the remaining 50% to be the subject of consultation by the Minister with the relevant parish to determine whether it should be restored to agricultural use or to be made available to the parish for the benefit of the parish as a community space. And B, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25 should be further amended in such respects as may be necessary consequent to the adoption of A.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the Island Plan, as proposed here today, is significantly harsher in terms of dealing with the issue of derelict glass houses than the previous Island Plan. This Island Plan is seeking to almost prohibit any development of the derelict glass house sites that are I would argue, a dangerous eyesore that blot many corners of our beautiful island. That also set against the context of what we all understand to be a housing crisis. And of course, this debate is all about identifying sites where we can potentially provide additional units of housing. The Minister in his comments argues that this is an inappropriate discussion to be had at this stage because his officers did not consider any of these potential sites when they assessed sites across the island for the provision of housing. Well, I'm afraid, sir, then that's a hole in their preparation. And I really seek this assembly today to reconsider that. I'm not asking that every derelict commercial glasshouse site in the island is now offered potential for housing. The definition, I think, is clear in the proposition that those sites should be close to existing settlements and the necessary services. So I hope that this actually will be seen to be what it is, and an attempt to A, deliver more housing, B, remove some of the dangerous eyesores that we have around the island. And so with that, I think we will move to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Who wishes to speak on the amendment? Yes, Conatard.
So I'm happy to speak on the amendment. Members will be aware that when our greenfields at St Clements were under threat, I sent an email around to everybody, and I couldn't understand, being a new member of the States, why we were going down the path of surrendering our 51% green fields to building whatever types of homes we need for our population, without regard to the demolition of greenhouses, which had lain derelict for up to 30 years. Half of them are dangerous and should be brought down in any case, and farmers should be made to do so. And I do understand that rules and regs were put into place, but nothing's happened. And all it would need would be some adventurous teenagers to go in there and have a serious accident for us to change our mind about the whole situation. Greenhouses in question have lain derelict and have no use to the economy whatsoever as they currently stand. There are acres and acres of greenhouses around the island, and there are some in most parishes. In Grooville alone, there's an 11-acre site which might be turned over to a nursing home and a cannabis farm. That is sufficient for a primary school, sheltered accommodation, housing for the elderly, i.e. drop-down housing where they sell off their larger family homes, and they have utilities, they have electricity, they have abundant water supplies, and they have gas or oil heating for their produce. By and large, they are very close to main roads, and if not large by-roads, by virtue of the fact that they need access for huge tractors and lorries, and therefore they are highly accessible. And I wondered at the time why this was not looked at first before we went into the greenfield situation. I'm not a fan of using greenfields. It seems to me that we've gone the other way around, and now we're forced to look at the situation where there was a very viable resource available as a major alternative. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatard. Deputy Tadier.
Thanks, sir. I was half expecting the constable to say we've got lots of derelict greenhouses, it's terrible and they should be forced to return them to make them greenhouses again, but normal services resume, sir, because I was worried we might agree on something, but there's still time. I'm particularly worried about this amendment. It actually goes completely contrary to a proposition I've been working on, but I didn't feel the need to lodge it this side of the election because I'd had sufficient reassurances from the Minister and the Department in various emails, questions in the Assembly, and I was reassured when he told me that the policy vis-à-vis greenhouses, glass houses, hasn't changed. I'm one of those people who will walk through the countryside and when I lived in Grooville, I did do quite a long walk right into St Saviour, into town with the dog, I think, and we passed quite a lot of derelict greenhouses on the way. And the name Le Bouleveau is ringing a bell. I think I took some photos there. And I looked at those and I thought, what a terrible shame, those greenhouses. What a waste it is. They could be used for growing things. You could grow tomatoes, you could grow plants in there, you could grow all the food that we need for our communities, because food security is an increasing issue. And rather than importing all that food from abroad, from miles and miles away, why are we not growing? And the problem is, it's absolutely right that we shouldn't be allowing these glasshouse sites to fall derelict. I know there's another one up towards Moffon as you come from the zoo in towards town and towards Le Hugby. The Minister has the ability to instruct the owners of those sites to put them back into use. And for me, they are greenfield sites. And they're greenfield in the truest sense of the word. They're not just green because they're grown over with grass and they're used for the occasional grazing. Clearly, that's not what they're there for. They are there, and they should be there to be the breadbasket for our island. But that's not what they're being used for. And again, similarly to dilapidated properties or empty properties, we need to say to those owners, put them back into use. You've got a year to do it. And if you can't do it, you will be fined. And if you can't afford to do it, then have a conversation with us, sell them to somebody who can afford to take them on, or we'll buy them off you. We'll buy them off you at agricultural rates, whatever the going rate is, and then we'll put that into land banking so that at least we know those fields are secure and they will be owned as a last resort, of course. I know that people are uneasy about compulsory purchase, but it's reasonable to say to people, look, if you can't do anything, if you can't maintain that building, we'll help you out. We'll take it off your hands because we will make sure that it's passed on to somebody who can use that for agricultural use. And the risk is, of course, it sets a really bad moral example. If we allow people to simply let the properties fall into disrepair, contrary to what the law says, that they should maintain them, because of course these were given permission to be agricultural at some point. Those edifices, even as greenhouses, had to be given permission to be constructed. If they can't be maintained, we are rewarding bad behaviour by saying to the owners, okay, you win now, you've held off for long enough, and we've not done anything because we're a bit too laissez-faire in our policy, so there you go. And of course they have a huge uplift in the value of that land. And the other problem is this comes at a time, so even if this were a good idea, and I can see that there'll be members in the Assembly who are sorely tempted to go down with this. It's only 50% of the fields. It does solve some of the housing crisis. We need to have that land transaction value tax in place before we even consider doing anything like this, to make sure that the public gain is there first before we allow and sanction something like this, which I would be against anyway. But if we are going to do it, we need to make sure that where there is somebody who's becoming vastly more wealthy overnight, simply because they've squandered the land that they've had, and through attrition, we've decided today that they may build on that property. We at least need to make sure that some of that money is going back into infrastructure projects, other than just through ordinary planning gains, sir. So I'd say this isn't the time to do it. I would be grateful to hear from the Minister and the Assistant Minister, who I know the Assistant Minister lives and represents some of those rural areas where the glass houses have fallen into disrepair, see what she thinks about it. But certainly from my point, I'm more concerned about food security and about making sure we have proper policies in place rather than rewarding, literally financially rewarding bad behaviour from these owners, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I thought I'd speak early because I listened intently to a short speech, but a good speech by the proposer and Deputy Taddeo's speech. Now, I say I speak early because I need everyone else in the Assembly to give me a very, very good reason, more than Deputy Taddeo has, not to support this. Because we do need homes. Where I live, sir, in the last Island Plan debate, I was looking out on the old samurai nurseries, and I know that was resisted. Glass house, old glass houses falling down. We tried to get something done, and they were resisted and resisted for years not to build. And as over the last 6 years, I've seen the houses go up. As they go up, people have moved in. It's a beautiful estate. It's all little parks. Some are first-time buyers, some are rented. And, you know, I listened to Deputy Tadier, and doesn't he live in a lovely world where these could now, glass houses, which are now redundant from memory, did grow tomatoes, but you could bring them in for a pound from the UK, and people want to buy them for 80p a pound in Jersey, and it's costing us £2.80 to produce them. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Deputy Tadier wants living wage for everybody, and every time we put the minimum wage up, some certain farmers growing a crop, they've gone out of business. So I can't square that circle. Deputy Tadier says about rewarding terrible or bad behaviour. Now, it goes back to the same argument today. You can't force people to grow things. Who's going to grow? Secondly, where the workers coming from? And if there was profit, I'm sure they wouldn't have been gone derelict in the first place. Look, I do think there needs to be some investigations, because I know a lot of growers who came out and it was tomatoes. I remember that well. They got some good payouts. Now, there could be some sort of trade-off. But as I say, so I've spoken early. I know we are desperate for homes. And I know, I listened to Senator's opening speech. She said they would be near, built-up areas, places that have got, the small shop that you need, a community, not in the middle of nowhere. And I fully understand, I know estates that have been built in the middle of nowhere, and then they're not nice places to live. So I've spoken early. I want somebody to convince me not to support this, because Deputy Tadier's argument certainly didn't. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gila.
Sir, well, I will try to persuade the Deputy. I think one of the misconceptions here is that we didn't look at those sites. Actually, if you remember, the process of the island plan is that there was a call for sites. Basically, we asked from the whole island for every site that was considered. It was a little bit better if the owners of the sites were involved, but basically anybody could submit any site. That gave birth to a very long list, which was then scrupulously assessed. And I think that's quite important to remember, because a lot of sites were added at the last minute. But the original list was really, really very carefully assessed. And the original list included quite a lot of greenhouses. And of course, the first part of the assessment was, is it a brown site? Because if it's a brown site, then we don't have a problem. We're going to jump on it and put bricks on it immediately. So greenhouses are not brown sites, but they're probably in the beige category. They're the next best thing. And when we went through this assessment, this very, very scrupulous assessment, under a number of categories and under a number of assessments, none of the greenhouses survived. Basically, none of the sites that we got in our list was good enough compared to other sites. Most of them were green sites. So they really, really had to be bad to fail in so many instances to not survive this selection. So we did look, and that's quite important, we did look at greenhouses sites. They would have come in at the top of the list as beige or almost brown sites, and they didn't, because they failed in so many other respects. So that's quite important. We did look at them, and they failed. The other thing that's quite important is that we tend to forget that the island plan is a very, very large document, and there are lots of other enabling policies. So in the case of greenhouses, there's GD4, which actually enables linked development. So if somebody comes up and says, well, I've got this massive greenhouse site and I need to build a couple of houses to finance the development of the cleanup of the rest as it back to agricultural land or to a better use, that's actually possible. It is something that already exists in the plan. So why do we need to vote against this? First thing is we did it already. We looked at the greenhouses sites that could be developed, the ones that were brought during the call of for sites, and they didn't work. They just didn't work. So why would they work now when they didn't work then, when we found so many problems with them? Is very, very difficult. Second, there are ways of developing them already in the plan today. And third, unfortunately, this is very, very general. This basically says, you have a greenhouse somewhere, you can develop half of it, and as long as you bring the other half. That's not precise enough. That's not good enough. We need to look at all the other details, as we have done with our list of sites. We need to make sure that this is still possible, that this still works, and it's not just I can't believe I'm agreeing with Deputy Tadier that it is not just a very, very quick way of making money. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And it's been a strange debate. Strange few debates last year. Senator Farnham said to me, I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying, that his voting record with me over the last couple of days has frightened him, which is fair enough. I can honestly say so. It frightened me too. But there we go. And I find myself in agreement with Deputy Guida. What a world we live in at the moment. It is a strange and changing world, but perhaps for slightly different reasons. I have a problem with the greenhouse sites, similar to Deputy Tadier. I really am thinking ahead for this island, which is 9 by 5, and a changing world. And the fact that food security, which is something that people just throw about, is a very genuine issue that we will have to face in the future. And we have to look at ways in which we can become more self-reliant. Now, economically, that may be difficult. But what we're not doing is investing in the right ways so that we are supporting the redevelopment of greenhouse sites so that we are growing for our island. Those that are derelict, one of the simplest things that could have happened with derelict sites, which were out of use, and I'll use that phrase, out of use, was to set up community allotments. So there's a space here where you could grow. There are communities who want to be involved. There is nothing better for children and young people than to be involved in growing something to get them to eat it. I sound like my granddad now. I really do, and because that's what he used to say to me. But he's absolutely right. And these are opportunities that we'll miss, and they will be gone. And that's my concern. And I look at the Senator, and it may be a strange concern, but it genuinely is. Also, there is a point about leaving a greenhouse derelict for a long time and then being able to sell for homes and making those huge amounts of money. Because even with the best will in the world, I think those potential profits drive us people towards going down that line, because money does speak. Another nice thing about the debate, I thank Deputy Martin for using the phrase pound a pound. It reminded me of being back in Roman Road Market. And I think that a pound for some tomatoes would be very good nowadays, but they're not going to be. And what we are doing on this island is importing so much. I went to the shops the other night and green beans from Kenya. Now, I'm not being funny, but that is a huge number of air miles. That is a hugely wasteful way to us to buy our food when we have sites on the island. And if you look at the food chain in terms of where they're coming from to get food onto this island, the costs at every single stage, I cannot help thinking that a more coordinated approach to what we can grow and what we have on the island already, such as the greenhouses that are derelict, would be a much more intelligent way for us to look at our food supply. And before we lose these sites, I think whatever government, and I would suggest that a government that is successful would take a coordinated approach to that and have a long-term view. And that long-term view might be longer than the 4 years that any government is in power. But it has to be taken for the long-term view of this island. The solution to the housing crisis isn't simple. Yes, this looks like a relatively simple solution to some of the housing crisis. I wonder, though, if the implications of this further on are greater than we need to be, and there are other solutions to the housing crisis. We have nothing on unoccupied homes at the moment. There is no tax on unoccupied homes. We don't have the amount of times that my colleagues have tried to get more affordable homes built and the percentage increase, and it's been voted against in this assembly. That is one of the issues why people are not getting homes on this island. And so therefore, I think there are other issues afield here. And therefore, it's one of the reasons I cannot support this, even though it is obviously well-intentioned, and I get it. I do get it. But I think there is a wider debate, and I don't think it would be a surprise to the Senator that I'll be talking about things like food security and air miles and things like that in sort of opposing this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I'll start by actually responding to Deputy Ward in many ways. I completely share his concern about food security in the island. It's something that worries me every day at the moment, and part of the answer is certainly growing things here, but the trouble is it costs a lot more money to do that locally. That's ultimately the economics, which is so very difficult to get over. And actually this proposition, I think, before us, this amendment before us, is effectively about economics as well. And I'm undecided. My heart tells me, yes, I want to support this amendment because, you know, I am fed up. I think I was in the media 2 or 3 years ago pointing to a derelict glass house and saying, why are we talking about green fields when this is standing here? Derelict, with rubbish inside, bits of concrete, etc. as well. Far better to use this to build on than to take a completely untouched green field. But at the same time, I do understand when someone like Deputy Ward comes along, quite rightly, and says, but we could use this glass house, we could be growing our own food in this glass house. And to some extent, yes, he's right. The difficulty is the economics. The frustration is, it is cheaper to buy something and bring it in from the UK, even if that object started its life in Kenya or Mauritius or Morocco or wherever, than it is to grow it in St. Peter or St. Mon or Grouville or wherever it may be. And this is the difficulty with the food security issue. At the moment, I am minded to continue my support of this because, yeah, if I am at the end of the day to vote for some of the greenfield sites that the Minister for the Environment is proposing, I can only do that if I feel that we are using other sites to the less greenfieldy, and I thought was it Deputy Guida who said beige sites, and I think that's an excellent description. If we're using these less pristine sites first, and that's the bit which is driving me towards the amendment at the moment is, and at the end of the day, you know, the fields that we don't build on, because we're using glasshouse sites, they can also be used for growing food to help with our food security issue as well. But I would love to have a conversation with Deputy Ward about food security because it's something that is going to be, it is in the rural economy strategy. It is something we do need to get to grips with, and the next government needs to deal with properly. But it's not, sadly, the answer is not all just about growing in Jersey because that is economically unviable. But I think at the moment I'm sticking with support of this amendment on that beige idea that it is better to use an already kind of existing glasshouse site, often with that glass in the soil itself, often with concrete, often with rubbish, vehicles often left there. Better to use that for housing than to use a pristine green field. That's where I stand at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy St Martin.
So I have a question for the Attorney General, if I may.
Yes.
The question is this. In the Senator's amendment, she mentions existing settlements. The Minister circulated a map using the built-up area. And the question is this, sir. Does the Attorney consider the existing settlements are the built-up area?
Yes.
Could they be outside of the built-up area?
Mr. Attorney.
So I will need some time to think about that. It is a question of law, but yes, I will.
I can't quite hear you, sorry.
So I will need some time to think about that.
Yes. How long do you think?
Insofar as it is a question of law, but I will need some time to think about it.
Yes. How long do you think would be? Do you think you'll need?
Probably half an hour. So I'll need to find the map and consider. Yes, about half an hour.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. Yes, Deputy St. One.
Thank you, sir. And I can understand the intention of the Senator in bringing this amendment and her intentions to alleviate the pressures on housing in the island, because this is a proposal which, if agreed, would deliver more affordable homes sites. But I can't help thinking that for the last 18 months or so, we as an Assembly and the island has gone through the Bridging Island Plan process, and there's been a call for sites, and people who wanted to promote sites for housing development have had to jump through hoops and try and persuade the planning team within this process that the sites they're putting forward are suitable for development. And there are all sorts of criteria that need to be considered and met for those sites. And rightly so, because we don't want indiscriminate building across the island. We want to make sure that any sites that come forward for housing are the right sites and have the least impact on the open countryside. But in this policy that's proposed by Senator Moore, it seems the only criteria is that you have a commercial glasshouse site and it becomes available, or perhaps only if it's in close proximity to existing settlements. But there's no other criteria. What about an adverse impact on the countryside around if any number of houses were built? So we have some very large glasshouse sites in rural areas. Let's say 50% of them produced, 20, 30 houses. What would be the impact of that sort of development on the open countryside? But it's not a criteria. The criteria is find a commercial glasshouse site, show it's in close proximity to an existing settlement, and hey presto, that's going to be supported. Why wouldn't these sites be brought forward in the same way as all the other sites that have been considered in the course of the Bridging Island Plan? And if they're suitable, having met the same criteria as all other sites, then they will come forward, not because they're commercial glasshouse sites, but because they meet the criteria that's been set down in the plan which everyone else has worked to. And to Deputy Martin, who was talking about the Samray Nursery site and how that's been transformed and is a great improvement, perhaps it is, but I suggest it's not come forward because it was a former glasshouse site. I don't know, but it's probably come forward because it was in the built-up area and met other criteria. I also have concerns about the wording here, close proximity. Well, what does that mean? How close? Proximity means near, and what does closely near, close proximity mean? So can you be proximate but not closely proximate? Just what does it mean? And yes, the Deputy St. Martin is right to raise the question of what are existing settlements, but to take the words on their face value, there are settlements all over the island. In Jersey, unlike rural parts of England, we don't essentially have a village and rural system. Our countryside has seen development throughout the centuries with farms all over it, and we have settlements along so many parts of our rural parishes, and not just the village centres. So they could be defined as settlements, and it reminds me of a planning application that I got involved in, I think, 3 years ago now in my parish, and it was an application relating to a commercial glasshouse site which was in use, which was had a business running from it, which exported flowers in Rue de Grantet, Saint-Ouen. But the owners obviously saw that it had more value as a housing development site. And it was adjacent to existing houses, so an existing settlement. And it would have been in close proximity. There were houses next to it on the other side of the lane. So it would probably have come under this policy. It was certainly a commercial glasshouse site. And the proposal was to build initially over 20 houses on a lane far away from the existing St. One's village in a rural part of the parish. It went before a planning inspector, and his decision was very firmly that future development in rural areas should be concentrated around the village settlements. And otherwise, I'm paraphrasing, but this is how I remember his findings, that we would see randomized development in pockets all over the rural parishes. And that, he thought, was not how our countryside should be developed. So, sir, I really have concerns about this policy, well-intentioned though I'm sure it is. But these sites could be brought forward under the normal assessment for sites, if thought suitable, rather than adopting this single or very narrow criteria. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Yes, Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, sir. A very important debate, this one, sir. At the start, really, okay, it's coming up under the economy section, but this is the prelude to our housing debate. A housing project that we've been working on through the processes that the Deputy at St. Ouen described, and we've arrived at a set of options which the plan puts forward as the best and the ones that can be recommended to the Assembly, which would allow us to double our completions of housing in the lifetime of the plan. A huge difference, and we have gone through extensive processes of evaluation to determine which sites can be put forward, involving our community. Now, I'm absolutely sure this is well-intentioned, and the question is probably this one about what to do about derelict houses, derelict greenhouses, and how we can get them dealt with, has been, as long as I can remember, for decades. And I think, unfortunately, to go with this now would have, I believe, very substantial undermining effects on the rationality in our land use planning, not just our system, but the whole way we've tried to approach things in both the way land is used in Jersey. I mean, look at the numbers. I've been given these now. There's now 155,000 square meters of glass now, which is 15.5 hectares of land over 85 verges. 50% of that would be 7.75 hectares, which potentially is 300 homes circa. So if we go with that, well, the question would ask, why bother with the rest? Why bother with the whole process of evaluation of dealing with the villages, trying to allow those villages to develop in a way which doesn't completely change the character of development in Jersey. And of course, we only need to look at our neighbours, our sister island in Guernsey, where their pattern of land use, where you have pepper potting of development all over the place, is essentially the result of exactly a policy of encouraging glass houses just because they're glass houses, to go into homes. And it's hugely controversial there as well. But for us, I think we can do things better. For example, Deputy Gila has correctly pointed out that there is a policy that is there to enable a landowner with a derelict greenhouse to have what we call enabling development. Means they can get a consent for a development to raise equivalent to and no more than to allow them to clear that land. But what we have seen, those opportunities have been taken up by not many. And the reason is landowners, in my experience, prefer to wait and leave the land as it is in the derelict state in the hope that one day they might get the permission for homes and thereby hugely increase the value of their land, purely by the accident that they've allowed it to go derelict. And I think that would effectively, what would that mean? I think, this amendment has the potential to bring about that situation. I think the Senator just started by saying the policy in this plan is stronger. It is no difference. I've checked with the officers. It is no difference. No different to previous policies. It is unchanged. And it's not true to say that no glass houses have come through the process. We've ended up with two of those, S729 and 0785, are both former glasshouse sites, which are they've gone through the plan and are in the list of the H5 sites in the plan, in the draft plan. It is not true to say that no glasshouse sites have been considered as part of the call for sites. They have. And I'm looking here at the St Clement, Field 252 in St Clement. And of course, all the time I've listened to, I have to say I'm a little bit taken aback by the Constable of St Clement's comments. I'm sure he's absolutely sincere. But as long as I can remember, people in St Clement have actually clamoured against those development of those glasshouse sites. Now, I'm really having a difficulty in squaring all the emails I've been getting, was 400 in that area, probably, that we should just have a policy that would automatically switch on, and you've seen the map. And of course, the map doesn't tell us what proximity means, as the Deputy of St Juan told us, and the Deputy of St Martin queried. What does proximity mean? Well, everywhere is pretty close in Jersey, isn't it? And then, of course, also I know that we have very significant demand for cannabis centres. Now, do we want to have medicinal cannabis industry or not? I visited two major glasshouse sites which are redundant and are having major investment in them to put them into medicinal cannabis, which we still treat as an agricultural use. And I think that's right, we do. Now, just think where the locations are, those. Now, just probably give members a flavour of what effect such a policy might have. One I have in my mind is the former site of the Tamber Park on St Lawrence St Mary border. I think we all know just how controversial that has been. What we have now, we've been through a number of iterations of uses which haven't been benign, resulting in a lot of neighbourhood reaction, problems. Enforcement notices have had to be served, and noise nuisance and so on. The Deputy of St Juan raises that question. Where's the criteria? Where's the criteria for that? But anyway, going back to the point of location, what would happen there, of course, is those glass houses would become 50% into homes by virtue of such a policy. It's certainly proximity to Carrefour saloons, no question. But now what we've had is it's been very good news for me, frankly, that we've got an investment of millions of pounds using those glass houses into a cannabis, medicinal cannabis outfit. And I think there is still another half of that scheme to do. I do wonder, would they still go ahead with the second part of that scheme if they could get, housing benefit on that site? I don't know. The other one was at St Martin, and Deputy St Martin will know that site better than me, I think, and the Conitab. Very large glass house sites, also being invested now in conversion and putting it to new use. And I understand from the officers there are, I think, about 5 others in the pipeline. So there are real uses for glass houses in a new guise. Previously they've been tomato, and of course the edge and flow of tomatoes industry has changed. But so I think there are real major implications of this. And of course many of those sites are remote. When I say remote, I suppose nowhere is that far in Jersey, but I mean remote in terms of where the actual closeness to the settlements. And what we try to do in the site evaluation process for sites for homes is to find sites that can be absorbed within the built-up area boundaries by extending those boundaries. I call it allowing them room to breathe, so we don't change the complete nature of the way in which we manage our landscapes. So the reason why, okay, we only got 2 through the process because most of the good ones have been used up, if you like. When I say good ones, the ones that were rated highly for homes have been used over probably the last decade, I think. I think St Clements has absorbed a lot of them. And of course, another thing I hear, for example, a lot of them, I think, are on the flatlands of Grooville. And of course, one message I've been getting in my hundreds of emails recently about the Grooville sites is developing low-lying areas and flood areas. So could such a policy, following the logic of it, there's one of those planned sites is down in that Grooville plain for the cannabis. Are we saying, well, we can have housing on that site as long as it's a former glasshouse site, but we can't have housing where there is no glasshouse site? Is it logical? It's all, it is low-lying, and there are real implications for that area about changing of the character. So here we've got a very blanket policy that I think carries with it, or if you like, an overriding policy presumption that this is what it will be. So the ones, the sites that have been gone already, the former Hodge, Lacane and Samaray Nurseries sites, the site Hameau de Mere in St Clement, De la Mere Nurseries in Grouville. The plan has got a site in Rue de Coney, St Juan. Now there is one in St Saviour, the nurseries there, although I think the owners decided they're going to hang on. Perhaps they might have a view that they're perhaps waiting for this policy. I don't know. But the spatial strategy is the thing that is really the deepest worry. The spatial strategy in the draft plan is one that successive planning committees and states have followed for decades, I think with great effect, as I said on our day one of our debate on this, that we really do need to hang on to that. It's important to maintain that pattern of land use and not allow it to peppy pot developments around the countryside. And of course, we've got to look at sustainability of travel and transport, walking and cycling. That's another reason why we try and locate the facilities for new homes very close, immediate to the centres. And where, of course, to make sure they've got all the the facilities that they need. And so what did the inspectors say about it? There are implications, they said, that flow from the approach, particularly in relation to the use of the redundant glasshouse sites. A number of those making representations argue that glasshouse sites should be seen as brownfield lands. But that's not how our planning system has seen them for decades. They are agricultural land. They do not lose their agricultural use. If you make them brownfield lands, then I think you're open to all sorts of other aspects. For example, why not have light industry? Why not treat it as brownfield land? Then they go on, the inspector goes on, and a number of those sites, those making representations, argue that glasshouse sites should be seen as brownfield land and used for residential development in preference to rezoning greenfield sites for housing. It is claimed there is no realistic chance of redundant glasshouse sites being returned to agricultural use. Well, I think I've mentioned two things. I don't know they had any evidence of this, but I've certainly seen. At the time of the Island Plan inquiry, I think we had 2 sites being taken up for cannabis. Now I think we've got many, many more. And of course there is the policy for, as I've said, for enabling development to help that happen, where they can have some development under the existing policies. I think it's GD4, as Deputy Gida said, in the plan. So whatever they go on, whatever the merits of the argument, promoting the use of redundant glasshouse sites for housing in the island would have an adverse impact on the character of the open countryside and would undermine the suitability, sustainability credentials of the Bridging Island Plan. So the exception to this would be glasshouse sites that are in or exceptionally closely related to existing built-up areas. And that is the criteria which the planning team and all of the work done has tried to apply in bringing forward those sites. As I say, they have brought them through in the past. We've now got, only 2 left. Sorry, 2 in this plan. Others were considered. They didn't score as well. And there is this issue about how we can get rid of them. But it is really good news that there is new uses being proposed for this glass. So it would, the potential to have unintended consequences for our agricultural industry. We've still got a decent area of glass. Would it provide a lucrative exit strategy? Could that encourage speculation in the development of glass houses? In the release of glass houses, in the expectation where you get consent. So I think the amendment obviously contains what potentially could be seen as quite an attractive arrangement. There's the idea of getting community facilities as part of them. But of course we already have the planning obligations, powers and policies to use, and they will be used to deliver community benefits. So I will be arguing that that I don't consider should be allowed to override the planning conditions, sir. So I hope, well, I do more than hope, I ask states members really to reflect carefully on this. This is probably one of the most significant amendments to the Bridging Island Plan. And if members to adopt it, I think it would seriously change the planning system in Jersey, undermine so much has been done, and run the risk of damage or change to the pattern of land use and landscape. So I think on that basis, I feel I have to strongly ask the states not to support this amendment.
Thank you, Minister. Chief Minister.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, sir. Got an echo somewhere in there. Hold on a moment. Okay, can you hear me okay, sir?
Yes, we can.
Okay, apologies, I was getting echoes. Yes, I'm pleased, sir, to follow the minister. I agree entirely with what he said. Sorry for essentially tailgating him straight into this part of the debate. I absolutely accept the propositions, the amendment being brought, so with all very good intentions. But certainly, when I started, what I wrote down, it was basically just too generic. And it does go back to this point, what does close to mean? You know, if it's anything within a mile, then basically we're talking about every glasshouse site on the island, which, as the Minister has just said, and I think is 85 Gs, of 43.5 Gs of which roughly, or 82.5 Gs roughly, will be turned into brownfield development. And people may disagree with me on this one. I don't necessarily automatically look at a greenhouse site and think it as a brownfield site. What I was going to say, so I think again the Minister's covered it, so I will. It means my speech is going to be a lot shorter than it could have been. The introduction of the cannabis permits does mean that actually there is a viable industry there, sir, for quite a very lucrative industry, actually, sir, for a diversification side for the agricultural industry. So, and although, sir, I don't always agree with everything that comes out of planning, as I'm sure none of us do, but I think what the Minister said is absolutely fundamental. I.e., this seriously undermines the planning process, the island plan process that we've gone through over the last, whatever it's been, 2.5, 3 years. In other words, what is the point of going through an assessment process of the sites that they have done and all the rest of it, when actually you could just add 43.5 Gs in what he had described as a very pepper pot kind of approach, which basically our sister island has followed. And I know we are bigger, we have more land area, but I think one of the successes, irrespective of all the individual issues that many of us may have, one of the successes of the planning process over many years has been effectively to consolidate development such that you don't get ribbon development all the way through the countryside. And I think this does risk that. Plus, and this is purely my opinion, obviously, greenhouses tend to be in rural locations, which although they will have, probably will have utility access, particularly if this proposition was to be adopted, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the traffic flow, etc., particularly works, and that will be another consideration. So I think for the fundamental reason, and particularly we've had a planning inspector go through this whole process. If I understood the Minister correctly, he has also strongly advised against this as a suggestion. But irrespective of that, for all sorts of reasons, which I think the Ministers and others have far more eloquently alluded to, I absolutely join in the Minister in saying that I certainly will be voting against this amendment, and I hope the majority of members do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does any member wish to speak on this amendment?
Sir?
Senator Farnham, and then Deputy Haggerah, Deputy Gardner. Yes, Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. It's difficult because we want to find as many sites for affordable homes as possible. So I have a couple of questions for Senator Moore in relation to this, because I would be concerned that we might encourage current viable growers out of the market if they can realise they can make a quick return or bring forward a retirement plan by cashing in. But I might be wrong. Is it just derelict greenhouses? Would it exclude current existing growing operations? I just I just wanted that for clarity, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Hegaraf.
Thank you, sir. I worked at the Department of Agriculture as it was many moons ago in the late 80s, and I was part and parcel of the finance team and the loans team that did loans for various things in relation to agriculture, and was obviously part and parcel to the conditions, etc., that were put on any applicants if they got loans or when they had permission to build glass houses. My concern here, sir, is this. I've asked a question which I'm going to read for those members who may not have already seen it, and it was only actually tabled on the 7th of March. I have for a long time been concerned about the state of some of the glasshouse sites from a point of view of they're an eyesore, but more importantly, they're a danger to the public in general, but particularly to maybe some of our younger generation who might find it a joy to sort of play in them. But the thing is that, and I'm not minded, or I wouldn't want to see what we could call ribbon developments. However, if they are in sites which are well located, I think that that would be a good thing. But the question that I ask is because what's always been put, and bearing in mind both glass houses and polytunnels were not permanent structured, or weren't considered to be, they were considered to be temporary structured. If you look, and I have recently with the planning committee been to what was Tamber Park, and there's all concrete bases. And so for me, it's fine to say return it to agriculture. But I have a question in relation to that, and this is the question I asked, and I'm not totally satisfied that I have all the information that I would want in relation to returning these sites to agriculture. As a child, I recall very well that we had some fields that were very heavily stoned, which meant that when you used machinery in them, your machinery often broke because the stones came up through all the cogs, etc. And so they were not that great to work, if I'm honest, sir, but that's just what I'm saying here. In relation to these sites where there's glass houses and there's potentially concrete bases, and also potentially maybe plastic off the polytunnels or glass from the greenhouse if they've come to that sort of state. So I therefore asked these questions. How many have been returned to agriculture in the last 20 years, sir? No comprehensive data is held relating to the number of glass houses or polytunnels structures that may have been removed in the last 20 years. Whether the process for their removal is determined by any government policy or procedure, and if so, what that process is. Some glass houses and polytunnels secured planning permission that was conditioned or conditional upon their removal when they fell out of use. Quite clearly, this has not, if they were given those conditions, these clearly have not been followed up. And we will all know, particularly those of us on the planning committee, that there are issues about planning matters where people don't obey the rules. For example, they do things without permission and then come out afterwards. And basically there is a lack of resources to actually deal with all of this. So I ask these questions about, well, what's happened in the last 20 years when in actual fact we have not been following up those sites which are becoming derelict. And it says, sorry, I've just lost it, sir. Must apologise. It says, compliance with this aspect of permission, however, remains poor. Oh, that's a surprise then, isn't it? And the next question, sir, whether any government policy or procedure determines whether the land after removal is deemed suitable for all types of agriculture. And my point is this. If we have concrete, glass, plastic, metal in any of these frames, is that land then able to be reused for growing of potatoes or carrots or cabbages or whatever, or for the use of dairy herds? Can we put animals on these fields? Are they going to be deemed safe? The answer to that question, sir, some land where it has been subject to the sale or lease post-1974 will be required to remain in agriculture use unless the auspices of the Agricultural Land Control of Sales and Leases Jersey law. Now, that doesn't answer my question at all, sir, because it doesn't actually say whether the land is or is not suitable. And that's my point. So for me, I have a real issue about the derelict glasshouse sites. I fully understand that if people have been given those conditions, well, how long ago were those conditions? I worked in the Department of Agriculture in 1987. So actually, that's a very long time ago, even in my book. And so actually, I'm not convinced about some of the arguments put forward. It then also asks the question whether there is or has been any financial assistance available from the government for the purpose of removing greenhouses or polytunnels. And we all know a lot of these sites have become derelict because the sale of our tomatoes and those type of vegetables subsided along with Guernseys when we went into the EU. Because basically we can have all the tomatoes and all of the other fruits from our southern neighbours at a very cheaper price, as Deputy Martin clearly said earlier. So actually, that's why their usage has been reduced. And yes, I'm aware that we're now in a situation, because I'm on the planning committee and we've been to Tamber Park quite a few times, in relation to medicinal cannabis. But the whole point is not all of them are going to be into medicinal cannabis. And so for me, I need some of these things done about these glass houses. There is no current or historic financial assistance scheme available from government for the purposes of removing glass houses. And one does have to say, sir, whether or not actually those people whose sites have actually gone into that disrepair, what happens if it was an elderly person that died and the family have suddenly found themselves with this site and can't do anything with it? That's a question. But more importantly, I want something done with these sites. I don't want to build on a green field. So for me, I do accept what Deputy Guida said about they're almost beige sites and not brown, because technically speaking, they are still agricultural sites. But we do need to open our minds a little bit of how we can actually make sure that these sites don't remain in the condition, because we're not doing anything about them. We're not going to do anything, and if we don't do anything today, we won't do anything next week, next year, or the year after. So we'll still be sitting here, whoever is sitting here in the next assembly, with these questions about what are we going to do with these glasshouse sites. So I do feel we need to do something. There are, things, and as we all said, not all amendments are perfect. And I would only want to see that those that aren't in use. So I wouldn't want to see, as Senator Farnham said, I wouldn't want to see somebody suddenly saying, oh, hang on a minute, I can suddenly stop doing this and I can have my money here. I would want to see, the sites that have not been used for some viable time used in this way. So for me, sir, I will support this proposition because I don't want to see any green fields, and I drive past the same sites on a regular basis, and I know that some of them at Moful were used from glasshouse sites because it's called the vineries, and that tells you what it was before. And I'm not saying that the site opposite was or wasn't in the equation, but for me, I drive past a site which doesn't look like it's being used. It may very well be, sir. But then further down the road, somebody says, I want to take all of that big long, and my colleague next to me will be very happy, this big long site of green fields just up from Five Oaks. And so I can't get my head around not a glass house, but a green. I think I still know which one I prefer, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. The Attorney General is now ready to answer the question posed by the Deputy of St Martin. Attorney General.
Yes, so the Deputy of St Martin asked me a question about the reference in the proposed amendment to proximity to existing settlements and utility services. And I've reviewed what I think is the map that the questioner was referring to, which is a map of built-up areas. And so having reviewed the map, my interpretation of the reference to existing settlements is that word is to be given its ordinary and natural meaning, which is effectively any settlement or any house or group of housing, and it's not defined by reference to specific settlements or types of settlements in the map that I was directed to. The map that I was directed to refers to smaller settlements as a type of built-up area, but that is a reference to smaller settlements, and therefore the implication is, well, all types of built-up areas are settlements. So on either interpretation, my view is that the reference to existing settlements refers to a wide category of settlement, and that's as far as I can take it, sir.
Thank you. I think that answers your question, I think, Deputy. Yes, speak if you want to, yes.
Yes, thank you, sir. Can I say at the outset, sir, I'm grateful to the attorney for his...
Sir, apologies, I did ask a question for the AG.
Oh,
sir.
yes, I was simply asking the Deputy if he's got any supplementary questions for the attorney first. You don't do, Deputy, Sir Martin. Chief Minister.
Apologies, just before we start going on speak. All it was that I thank the AG for his explanation. So just to be really clear, he said natural meaning. He also said any house or group of houses. So in his interpretation, when he said it's the wider meaning, it could be a single house, in his view. Is that correct?
Mr. Attorney.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for that.
The next person I've down to speak is Deputy Gardner. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And members would be pleased to hear that Deputy Lahagarat covered probably 2/3 of my speech, because she did incredible work and asked so many questions. And I personally was considering to bring similar amendment, and I was pleased that Senator Moore did it. And one of the data, and I ask members just to bear with me for 6 points, promise, not more. When Deputy Lahagarat asked question, we know that 67,334 square meters of uncropped land under glass out of 150 for 832 square meters. So we're talking about just under half. 43.5% of land under glass houses, not all of them derelict, but it's very high amount. We're talking about 1/3 of our Jersey land. Now, second point, it has been raised already during the debate. We're ready to develop green fields, which are perfectly suitable for agriculture, for food security. But we are not ready to look into derelict houses. There's nothing that we can do with this land, and it may be dangerous to use them. I'm struggling, because yes, it happened. Yes, it's from 2011. It couldn't be developed just back into the agricultural land. For 11 years, it didn't happen. And yes, they didn't submit sites for the consideration from whatever reason. I don't know what reason happened. I would also ask, we know that this Bridging Island plan is Bridging Island plan. It was shorter period for consultation, it was shorter period for submission, it was shorter period for put our amendments. And if our process wasn't as it should be to allow enough time for everything, so maybe there are stuff that we should consider here. It was raised, and I'm grateful that, and I just would like to support question from Senator Farm about, and ask Senator Moore to reassure the Assembly if it's only about derelict houses, that not the houses that now work, and they can provide tomatoes, peppers, and other agriculture, would jump on it. We're all debating 355 pages of the policies. Can we trust our planning department that they will not sign off the development of the glass houses that will not be suitable for the island? Can we trust? Minister mentioned unintended circumstances for the agriculture industry. I agree. We don't want to have unintended circumstances for agriculture industry. And this is the reason that I would be supporting to look into the developing derelict glass houses than to develop on the green fields. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Sir Martin.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I absolutely want to sympathise with Deputy Gardner, Deputy Lagra, the Senator that's brought this proposition. It is absolutely wrong that we build on green fields while greenhouse sites are in the state that some of them are. They as just been pointed out, they are both in agriculture, but of course the green field and agriculture is worth something to a farmer, whereas a dilapidated greenhouse is worth nothing in the state it's in. But sir, the problem I have, and to misquote somebody if I may, the Senator doth propose too much here, and I'm going to explain why. I really would like to support her. I know exactly where she's going, where she's coming from on this, and we need to do something. But the problem I have is twofold now. The first one is where she says, except where a commercial glasshouse site is located in close proximity. There's no word dilapidation or dereliction in there. It's a commercial glasshouse site. It could be a commercial glasshouse site in production today. It doesn't specify that it has to be out of production. And it's also a glasshouse site in close proximity to existing settlements. We know because the Learned Attorney has just told us that that could be pretty much anywhere. I've just been sort of flying over the island in my mind, sir, and the Constable of St Clements will have a number of sites in his parish which qualify, as will St Saviour's, as will Grouville, St Lawrence, St John's, St Mary, St Wands, even St Helier. The Constable of St Helier has two major greenhouses, well, quite large greenhouse sites on St John's Main Road, both in his parish. They would qualify. My worry, sir, is that with one fell swoop of a button on our desk, we can turn the island plan policies upside down by allowing any commercial greenhouse site, pretty much, to have half of that site developed for affordable housing. As needed as it is, it's desperately needed, but not in this way, because what would happen, sir, is we would have housing popping up all over the island, and all the work of the island plan over the decades to try to keep housing and keep settlements in groups and to stop urban development and all those sort of things which blight countrysides could almost be put in the bin. So as much as I want to support the Senator, and I know what she's doing, I think we all know what she's trying to achieve here, it is wrong that these derelict and dilapidated sites, and they're dangerous as well, it's wrong that they're left as they are. We need to find a way to deal with them. But unfortunately, sir, the possibility of what might happen to the island if this amendment is passed is just too great to consider. So I'm afraid, great regret, I can't support the Senator with this.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. It seems to me that the taxpayer has given substantial grants to build the glass houses in the first place. And I understood that there was also an agreement that if the glass house was no longer used, the cement foundations and so on would be actually removed. None of this has been done. And, you know, we haven't even had a return on the grants. I do wonder about the fairness of this. And then added to which, I know young farmers who are wanting to rent glass houses, which are not being used anymore. They want to bring them back into business and so on. And the people who own them are insisting on rents based on the development value of the glass house rather than the agricultural value. So, you know, I think if we encourage more and more use of glass houses for developing into houses and so on, then we're going to make it very difficult for young farmers to actually get hold of glass houses to rent. So, no, I don't agree with this, and I won't be voting for it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. I'm actually pleased to follow the Senator there. I won't speak for very long, sir. I'm against this for two reasons. One is I feel a lot of this will be a way of getting development into St Clement again by the back door, because we have a lot of glass house sites. Deputy Martin was correct. We've redone or developed the Samurai site, and it is really nice for housing. Unfortunately, we still have huge shortage of facilities for school children, for play areas, etc., that have not been touched. So I could hardly support anything that could possibly encourage yet more housing to go in St Clement. Senator Ferguson rightly said, sir, I think that these glass houses were agricultural fields. They were built into glass houses. And yesterday we had a long and involved debate. It's a bit like the War of Jenkins' Ear, sir. We had a long and involved debate on Deputy Hewlin's windows, if we all remember that. And this was a case of where the window debate, as they have rotted and they're no longer any use, people who own those sort of places are told to put them back exactly as they found them. They can't just put something else in. They can't just sell the field for a couple of £1 million is what we're looking at here. Here, part of government, sir, should be, in my opinion, and I'm sure in many members' opinion, to drive good behaviours, whether that's deputy wards trying to get people onto buses or whatever. We should be trying to drive good behaviours. And this does nothing to drive good behaviour, sir. This effectively says let your greenhouse get into a terrible state of repair and then cash in to the tune of several £1 million. It's sadly, sir, a case of those in glass houses being encouraged to throw stones. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I can't believe I have to say this, but not only do I agree with Deputy Ash, but I agree with Senator Ferguson as well. What a day this has turned out to be. So, like them, I will be opposing this amendment, although I, as others have also said, I completely accept that this is proposed with good intentions from Senator Moore, and this comes right before we start many of the amendments on potential alternative housing sites, which is not going to be a lot of fun and which is going to force us to make some considerations we'd perhaps rather not on the balance between protecting agricultural land, green space, and providing affordable homes as well. But I think when it comes to this particular use of these particular sites, sites which are meant to exist for a particular purpose, the glass houses and the use that they serve, what the Senator is proposing strikes me as a bit arbitrary and not very well timed, given that we have had this very long process with the inspectors looking at particular sites, working out which ones would make the best sites and all of the other pressures that come with a particular site, not just about relieving the need for affordable housing, but when it comes to traffic, when it comes to infrastructure, and all those other things, and they haven't reached a conclusion that these particular sites can be justified. So I think that if there is to be a policy inserted about the use of glasshouse sites, it ought to be done so on a more considered basis, looking at not just trying to meet our need for affordable housing, which is absolutely right in the intentions of what Senator Moore is trying to do, but also how we get best use out of those sites. And Senator Ferguson raised some issues about that as well in terms of support for the use of those sites, and what or if there's anything that government can do to make sure that we are getting the best use out of them, that we are supporting the production of food on the island where it's appropriate, and perhaps even wider community uses for these sites as well. And so I think to make what would be quite a significant change in position based on this one amendment, I think would be the wrong thing to do. And I'll sit down still in shock at the strange alliances that seem to have been formed on this particular one.
Thank you, Senator. Conor of St John.
Thank you, sir. And along with some of the recent speakers, I find myself aligned to Deputy Luce. I was surprised last week when doing the tour of the sites with 3 colleagues to learn from an officer that whilst there'd been a call for sites, the department hadn't actually identified potential suitable sites. I say that as an observation rather than a criticism, as I feel that the officers have worked tirelessly, and whilst I don't agree with all of their findings, they've done, in my opinion, a very, very good job. So I thought this was a very attractive proposal because, like many, I'm really worried about the level of green fields that we're going to have to build upon to provide the demand, the supply for the demand. However, like all things that seem too good to be true, this also appears to be too good to be true. It probably is. We need more information, and I think it's disappointing not to be able to support this proposal. I think we've heard from many speakers about the issues of derelict houses. Where is the enforcement? If we need to invest in the enforcement, let's invest in the enforcement and let's get these sites working for us, either with the current scheme that could allow some to be turned into accommodation to fund returning them, but let's get on with the enforcement and let's do it soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conor. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Yes, Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, sir, regarding the removal of greenhouses when they've had their time, sir. Members obviously be familiar with the Nightingale Hospital, which we built recently. It was part of the arrangement, as the land was not ours, to return it to a green field as soon as the facility was no longer required. And I invite members to go down and have a look. You will never know that anything had ever been built there. The concrete removed, the tarmac removed, everything has been removed, and it has been returned to a wonderful green field. And also sincere thanks to the owner of the field for donating it to the people of Jersey. But as I say, it can be done, and I would like to see more of it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. If no other members to speak, I invite Senator Moore to reply. Senator.
Thank you, sir, and I thank everyone who has engaged in this debate because it is a difficult topic. It's a problem that has blighted our landscape for a considerable number of years, I would say 2 decades really, and this proposition was, I'm grateful to those who've kindly suggested, brought in the best of intentions in order to resolve that problem. Not upon all of the sites, though, it must be said, and I would like to really clarify, particularly the Minister has time and time again suggested that this amendment would apply to any glasshouse. It does not apply to any glasshouse site. The policy itself, ERE6, clearly states that it is about derelict and redundant glasshouses. Those 2 words are extremely important. So we are talking about derelict and redundant glasshouses. So those glasshouses who are close to settlements that blight our landscape and are dangerous, as well as being eyesores and also unused, providing absolutely zero use to our people and our economy. So I will go on later to describe how we got to that point and why it is perhaps not so easy to find a solution. But first I'd like to talk about the word derelict. So we've already identified that they are. History and Deputy Lehegrar helpfully described some of the history as to how we got here. So yes, Senator Ferguson is right. Grants were given to farmers to build these glass houses many years ago, and for many years we enjoyed a successful industry, but the bottom dropped out of that industry very quickly. And so, albeit they received those grants to construct the greenhouses, that money simply wasn't there when it came to pass that they no longer had any use. And we're all very aware of the lack of investment that has been contributed to our much cherished agriculture industry in the island, but it has suffered for years and years from a lack of investment. And Deputy Morrell is nodding his head over there, and he actually has managed to double the investment in his time as Assistant Minister with a responsibility for agriculture, and hats off to him for doing that, because we need to see more investment in agriculture if we are to see the green fields that we are later in this week going to desperately argue that we must not build upon. But if we want to see farmers actually manage to farm them for this year, next year and those years to come, then we need to do something about it and to perhaps provide some greater assistance. So that being said, it also must be said that there is a cost, a great cost, and the Infrastructure Minister, of course, highlights how easy it was to remove the Nightingale Hospital. But of course, that, A, did not have any glass involved, nor was it broken, and B, that was funded purely by the public purse, so not a business that was already struggling and on its knees and then having to find the money to... and I do know that it is extremely costly to clear sites, particularly when they are full of glass and other materials. We've all, I'm sure, experienced somebody dropping a glass on a hard floor. They're always very difficult to pick up, those shards of glass, and sometimes they can be found lying under cupboards and tables and all over the place for some days to come. And imagine that glass being scooped up and tipped all over loose soil or sand, and then people trampling all over it, ploughing it, and so that glass can travel quite deeply into the soil, and it does become extremely difficult to remove. So Deputy Lehegwa was again right in raising concerns about the use of those sites once they are contaminated by glass, because it certainly is not going to be an easy process to remove glass from it. Now, much has been made of the submissions that were proposed to the planners and the process that has gone on, conducted, of course, by the Environment Department. I would like to remind members that the Jersey Farmers Union did make a submission to the process, and indeed they supported and suggested the idea of finding some resolution to this issue of derelict glass houses. And so I found it somewhat disappointing, the attitude from the department, that these sites have not, that this is some sort of a new issue that's cropped up from nowhere. It certainly isn't. And in fact, colleagues and myself, when we started our research into this issue, found an article from the Jersey Evening Post back in May of last year that referred to this exact matter and proposed a solution that was exactly along these lines, because this has come with some discussion with farmers as to what might be a potential way forward. And let's not forget as well that this proposition amendment is about 50% of the site being returned to affordable housing. So therefore, this is not making a massive amount of money. We are not offering an opportunity for people to cash out and make millions. This is offering an opportunity to make some use from land that is otherwise derelict and redundant, to provide 50% of it as affordable housing, and 50% to be returned either to agriculture or to create a community garden. And I know members have got an awful lot of work in keeping up with all of the amendments in this plan and this debate. but my amendment does identify the Grow Jersey initiative, which is a fantastic thing. And if members haven't been to Serville to see the garden that's being created there by Grow Jersey, then I really would recommend that they do that, because it's all about creating local produce and getting people involved in growing locally and enhancing those skills and providing produce to our local communities. And I won't go into more details because you have to read my manifesto for that. But so Deputy Ward, I would suggest that this is actually about food security and providing a way forward. And of course, with the monies that are generated from the sale of half of the site for affordable housing, there will be some money available to put into the return to agriculture and the development of these community gardens, which will of course be alongside affordable housing sites. Personally, I cannot see a better solution for those new communities. Now, I was grateful to the Attorney General for his advice on the issue that the Deputy of St Martin raised in relation to whether it should be settlements or built-up areas. I did give some consideration to this matter because the island plan itself is peppered with different terms: settlements, small settlements, larger settlements, built-up areas, etc. And so perhaps this is my bad in terms of choosing the term settlements. But personally, my understanding of the use of the term settlements and the definition that's given in the amendment is that settlements would be a place where there's already some form of community, and a relatively large community. I think the map that the Minister has provided in his responses, which is available on page 87, sets out really a pretty defined area, and I think only 3 sites that would come under this amendment potentially if it was considered as built-up area. Now, this debate can, of course, be considered by future planning committees as sort of the discussion and the will of the Assembly at the time of debate. And I'm sure in the future, if this amendment is accepted, then the planning committees who will have to consider those sites going forward will perhaps look back, and they will be able to see that there was concern from many members about the potential for too many sites to be included in this. And therefore, I would like to state on the record for them now that perhaps it could be their will or a future minister's to make an order that, in fact, this is not any settlement, but a built-up area. And that has in itself evidence from the inspectors. Members, if they have the opportunity to look at the inspector's report, can find their reference. I think it's paragraph 3.5, which is about page 21. They talk about the use of derelict glasshouse sites. And yes, they do suggest that it would not be, in their view, acceptable to have those sites across the countryside all built upon. However, they do state very clearly in that advice that where it was close to a built-up area, then an exception could be made. So I think, in fact, the inspectors have opened the door and make it very clear that there is potential to accept this amendment, because it is the right thing to do, especially for those members who will have great difficulty later in accepting some of the propositions for building on green fields. Because we go back to the fundamental point, we're talking here about sites that have become derelict and or redundant. Therefore, they are a blight on our landscape. They are of absolutely no value currently. And this amendment will not be delivering millions to those people who own them, but they will be delivering homes, fresh produce, and a solution to something that has blighted our landscape for many years. So, members, I really would ask you to consider resolving this intractable problem that has beset our landscape for many years. Seek a way forward, and please vote for this amendment. So I'll ask for the...
Thank you. The appell has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. Those joining the meeting via the Teams link are invited to cast their votes in the chat channel. And I ask the greffier to open the voting for members in the chamber. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the amendment has been rejected, 19 votes pour and 26 votes contra.
May we have pour and the contra?
Yes.
Those members who voted pour. Sorry, the order has been mixed up. Senator Moore, Constables for St Clement, St Peter, St Juan, St Brelard, St Martin. Deputy I. Lehegra, Senator Farnham, Constable St Lawrence and St Mary. Deputies Gardner, Morrell and St Mary. And in the chat, Senator Gorst, Deputy Doublé, Constable St Saviour, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Wickenden. And those who voted contra were Constable St Helier, Deputy Guida, Deputy St Juan, Senator Mezek, Deputies Lewis, Pennell, St Martin, Constable Grouville, Deputy Southern, Ward, Young. And in the chat, Deputy Labby, Deputy Higgins, Constable of St John, Deputy Grouville, Deputy Truscott, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Martin, Senator Ferguson, Deputy of St Peter, Senator Lafondre, Deputy of St John, Deputy Pershard, Deputy Ash, Deputy of Trinity and Senator Pallett.
The next matter for debate is the 90th amendment lodged by the Minister of the Environment. I'll ask the greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2 after the words, the Draft Island Plan 2022-25, insert the words, except that A, any reference throughout the draft plan to 3,750 homes, where it relates to the demand for homes, should be substituted with 4,000 homes. B, in Policy H3, provision of homes, 4,150 should be replaced with 4,300, and 1,500 should be replaced with 1,650. And C, in the second paragraph of Policy H3, provision of homes, the words new homes should be substituted with the words up to 600 affordable homes.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The amendment deals with the overall housing supply requirement that the plan needs to address. And that, as a result of the inspector's report, needed to be amended. And so the reason for that, bringing forward that amendment to the draft plan, was that there were less housing completions than initially anticipated for 2020, and the need to increase the overall housing supply to cover the shortfall and to maintain what we have called in the plan a margin of supply over demand of 5%. And the additional homes to achieve that margin towards affordable homes equates to 150 additional homes. And so what we have is that the housing demand requirements of the plan is a combination of both projected future housing needs, and as members know very well, we've had to make a planning assumption for the whole purposes throughout the Bridging Island Plan, and that planning assumption has been unchanged since the plan work started, of 800 persons, an additional 800 persons per year. And also, at the same time, meeting unmet demand as a result of the population increase that took place above the rate of the housing delivery, which arose from the revised 2011 Island Plan. That was based on an anticipated shortfall of 1,800 homes from the last plan, and it's proposed that 50% is supposed to be met by the Bridging Island Plan. So that's the basis. It sets a goal of trying to increase the housing supply to be able to both deal with what is the planning assumption of future housing growth, future needs and unmet demand. And so the draft plan set the original target, the near term, what they've called the housing target of 3,750 homes for the period 2021 to 2025. And I've said, as I said, there was this shortfall of completions. So we need to increase the target from 3,750 homes to 4,000 homes. And that's unchanged from what I put in my post-consultation statement of response. The draft plan published a near-term housing supply of 4,150. That was in April 21, and it still maintains a margin of housing supply. So providing this margin of homes is normal practice, has been in past plans to account for uncertainties. And the inspectors recommended that margin should be increased. And that margin should be at least compatible with that was achieved in the 2011 plan. As a result, the overall level of housing supply is increased to 4,300 homes. And that this is reflected in the figures in this proposition. And of that, a key element is the proportion of those homes which are proposed to be affordable homes. And those affordable homes are proposed to be on land rezoned, because under the planning law gives the states, because it is the state's decision, the power to zone land for occupation by persons whose economic circumstances does not allow them to meet open market homes. So that is the view. So there should be no, as we go through the debate in the next, well, probably tomorrow, on the various sites, I ask members to bring in mind that all land proposed for rezoning is for affordable only, and not for open market housing. In the past, no state's land has been zoned for open market homes. Open market homes are developed on private sites, and there's a very clear distinction. I can know that members will have lots of questions about what is an affordable home. I think from the purposes of the plan, I would say that the details of how affordable homes are put into a practice, I think will be a combination of work, and a lot of work, I would say, on each individual site by the future housing minister to determine the rules, the site mix on every site, and the tenures, and set the rules about the housing gateway, although the states have, of course, made a decision already. Well, see, no, they haven't made a decision yet, but those rules will be defined. I think using the minister's power through the housing minister, the new housing minister, and also with the engagement, as far as I'm concerned, and it's clearly in the policies, with the parish communities, because I think that is absolutely essential. But I think that's a bit more of a detail, but I wanted to make it quite clear that that target of 600 homes affordable is entirely that. The larger figure for 4,300 is the other elements of that are the state's own sites themselves, where we develop land ourselves, the sites that are already in progress, where we've got consents out, but they are either under construction or about to go on the sites. Those are in those numbers. And indeed what we expect to get from the private sector by way of, if you like, speculative development. We've got a very good handle on those numbers. But I have to tell you, those targets are very, very substantial, and they effectively result in a doubling of housing completions, if my maths is correct, because our previous rate of completions of housing every year for the last 10 years has been 400 homes. Sorry, let's get this right. Yes, 4,000 homes, but in 10 years, 4,000 homes in 10 years, that's 400 a year. And every year we've, looking back over the last 10 years, only 10% of those completions have been affordable. 40 a year for the last 10 years. So, you know, in my opening remarks, I spoke about how, you know, well, that's our starting point. That's as we are now. So this is a very, very significant plan, and adoption of these figures, I think, will set. So this is an important amendment, because I think what I've asked to do in this amendment is to, before the states start to decide and discuss the individual options by the sites that we've got put forward by members' amendments, by myself and so on, I do ask the states to make a decision to go for this target, to adopt these new targets. There's quite a lot of significant implications of that. For example, I'm very much looking forward to see if anybody is able to talk about the capacity of the building industry. I know there's issues about pre-construction. I think we've got amendments there about reducing those issues, and also I suppose the implications on the market. But those fall outside of my direct responsibility. But I am very interested in knowing if members have views on that. So later on, in order to help members, and I've put the flag up on this now, I've made an amendment, number 91, which I set out where the sites that I am recommending be designated, that we provide on rezoned sites. And I published housing position statements. I hope members have all received that to help in this debate. It's a separate paper that sets out all the key issues, key numbers, the sites, all the characteristics of them in that paper. I hope members have all got that. If you haven't, I think the officers will help you find it, because I'm sure we won't. I'll be very surprised if we go on to start talking about that this evening. But nonetheless, it's a very, very helpful. I've done it to give members as much information as they can. And of course, that paper will show that we've got a number of amendments from members proposing to remove sites. And there's also proposals from members to add sites to those lists, which I have set out my views on how appropriate they are or otherwise. And so all those distinctions we've got. And so I'm not going to overstress this, but it's a fact, and on my note it's been underlined by the officers, but I think I need to put it on the record. We run a very real risk of finishing the debate without providing enough affordable homes. I think that's the challenge for members. So here we have an amendment, this one that we're doing now, we're going to hopefully vote on, if not this evening, but shortly, with adopting the targets, and then that then will follow into the debate, and there is that risk because we are bound by states' rules. You know, there's nothing. But anyway, I've just flagged it up, and members can think about that because we are dealing with the target first, and then the detail afterwards. As far as I know, we don't have an iterative. I'll be frank. We don't have an iterative process in States Assembly. I don't think I'm right on that, sir. We make a decision, that's done, we move to the next. So that's the process. And I think we should do our best to avoid a significant undersupply. And I think certainly, I think it'd be easier to manage if we get ourselves into an oversupply situation. I think because that will become immediately obvious as we go through the individual sites debates. But the undersupply situation is the risk. I've been asked, and I have discussed it. You know, the planning law gives the Environment Minister the task of presenting a plan, and obviously members have the task of making a decision on it. But this is one which I have discussed this target with the Council of Ministers, and so I'm saying this with the support of my colleague ministers, because I asked them, where do you think the range of our housing sites, affordable housing sites, that we would be acceptable in your view? Because the Council of Ministers do want to do their best to deal with this serious situation of housing supply. And I asked them for what they thought an appropriate margin of supply should be, and their view, and I've agreed to this, should be plus or minus 15%, which means either a minimum we're looking for, I believe, in the subsequent debate to follow, a minimum of 510 affordable homes and a maximum of 690 affordable homes from the rezoning of sites. And so, secondly, sir, I think in the note that I think probably in the note that I've put there the chart of how those numbers are made up. If it helps members, the affordable homes estimated supply 1,660, of which 625 are under construction, which I think are probably, my guess is that these are Andium Homes sites, or we have town capacity from government sites, and sorry, number 5, and the rezoning targets, as I said, are exactly as I've said. What I've tried to do, and this is an important thing in the plan, I've tried to make sure that the sites that come forward individually produced a proper balance between rural extensions, what is called strategic extensions, and suburban extensions, because I think that's really important, because we have a spatial strategy. For decades we've concentrated as much development as we can in the built area, and in the past I think the view has been taken that there should be no development in the countryside, and we should do all of the housing development in the built area. This plan departs from that, and if you like, in layman's terms, shares it out. Shares it out, I think, in a fairer way, and I think this is a whole island challenge, and that is why the range of sites that have come forward as recommended are as they are, with that kind of balance between the 3 different types of sites. And of course, but that balance, of course, will be subject to change according to how members vote in the debates to come on sites. And from my point of view, throughout those debates, I shall be looking to see not only is this site suitable, but what's the effect on the overall balance of how we end up with. So I think I'll leave it at that, sir. It's 5:25. Members want me. I think we may get a request for an early adjournment. I'll wait and see.
No, point of clarification, sir.
Point of clarification.
Point of clarification, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm not sure if it's point of clarification from the proposer or from yourself. We have to, the amendment asking us to make a decision on the number of houses that we are committing. Like if you're looking at affordable housing, most of them going through the rezoning. So if we will vote to this target, like 600 or 700 houses, and the worst case scenario, we reject all fields, I'm talking about worst case scenario, how would it work, us committing with this vote for specific numbers, and if none of the fields will be adopted, how we can work with this together? I'm just trying to understand the implication of this vote.
Yes. Well, that's for you, Minister, to obviously do.
Yes, I think I might have to ask advice on state's procedure, sir, but as I understand it, when we're dealing with amendments through the plan, I've proposed the plan, we're dealing with amendments. I think in a nutshell what Deputy Gardner's question is, what happens if we end up with inconsistent decisions on different amendments? i.e. we amend the numbers here and we say we want that, and then as we then go through the later amendments, we end up not achieving those numbers. I think that's where we end up with, and we have to make a decision as an assembly when it comes to pressing the button of the plan's adoption or not. I think, so I don't know, that's my understanding. It is open for me. I do have certain, you could regard it as privileges as a minister, that nobody else can lodge amendments, but I can lodge amendments with the state's consent, exceptionally at this late stage. My view of that, to do that on such a material thing, I do not think would be right. I think the views of this assembly are paramount. And so that power would, in my view, be used only in detail, and certainly not to reinvent or re-go over grounds that in later. I don't know, sir, if perhaps I could ask you, sir, is my understanding of state's procedure correct, that what I've said, that we take amendments one at a time, and there is no requirement effectively under state's procedure for those decisions to be consistent?
Yes, that's correct. There's always a risk of inconsistency, and at the end of the day, members will have to decide whether or not to approve the plan. Deputy Morrell.
Point of clarification as well, please, sir. It was just in his speech, the Minister referred to questions about the capacity of the construction industry to deliver. Could he clarify, therefore, does the Minister not have an understanding of the capacity of the construction industry to deliver the homes that he's proposing in this amendment?
To be frank, sir, I don't have the full answers on that. I'm hoping that our debate will carry on tomorrow and I'll have a chance to have a more briefing. But I think I've always made it plain to me that this is a very ambitious target of increasing the supply. We've got labour uncertainty, and we've got the question of to what extent the use of modern construction methods and prefabrication can make inroads to that. So I don't know if I'm able to do this. Maybe, sir, it's past. Could I ask the deputy whether you're prepared to allow me to answer that question, or provide him and all members of a written answer on that point after the adjournment, sir?
Well, there's another request for clarification, which perhaps we can hear tonight from Deputy Labby.
Yes, sir, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, Deputy Labby.
Thank you so much, Minister. It's just a quick clarification. Is there an opportunity, the Assembly, to vote on every rezoning in the green zone, every greenfield rezoning? I'm just concerned that are there fields which the Minister is accepting and which don't form part of a amendment, that could go through without a debate. Thank you.
That's a question, Deputy Levy, which I think will arise when we come to Amendment 91. But of course, if there isn't an amendment in relation to a particular field, then members will have to decide how they vote in relation to that amendment as a whole, and indeed the plan as a whole at the end of the debate.
So can I just ask one point of clarification? So I know it's late, but this amendment we're talking about here is the number of planned homes to be built.
Yes.
That is different from the number of fields, because the fields that we'll be looking at won't have a specific number of homes on them. So we may disagree with 5 lots of fields, but it just means you've got to cram more homes onto the fields we do agree with. So the number of homes is disjoined, is it not? I asked the Minister, from the number of fields. Thank you.
Well, that's a question for the Minister, but we probably are getting into the debate a little bit at the moment. Before we adjourn, I think formally someone should second the proposition, and then I can ask the Deputy Talier to ask this question to the Attorney General, which he can consider overnight.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Deputy Talier, do you have a question for the Attorney General? I thought perhaps it's helpful for you to ask it now in case it's a question he needs to reflect upon overnight.
So I'm not doing this deliberately. I'm aware that I ended the day like this with a cliffhanger, but I wasn't to know. So I hope it's relevant to what the Minister's been talking about. But the question is, if somebody who owns one of the fields, in private ownership, and that is up for rezoning, felt aggrieved that he or she was being forced to have all of the properties on that, all of the homes on that field to be affordable, so 100%, as I understand, is the case. And he or she might say, well, look, the States has got its own sites that it owns and isn't putting that kind of requirement on its own sites, where only 15% of their homes would be affordable. Is it open for the owner of that site to then lodge some kind of appeal or a judicial review, whatever it might be, to challenge the that decision that we're making today or whenever it is in the next few days? I don't know if that's. I think it arises out of this because we're going to be debating a lot of issues of rezoning, sir. And it seems to me that if I were the owner of one of those fields, that might well be something that would be at the back of my mind.
Yes.
So I don't need an answer now, so...
No, but Mr. Attorney, are you prepared to deal with that question overnight?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Constable Creville.
Yes, sir. Similar question to Deputy Ward, sir. I'm not quite sure what happens if we pass a resolution that requires a certain number of houses and then don't pass enough sites to provide those houses. What happens?
Yes, it simply means that the if there was an approval of this amendment and subsequently there wasn't sufficient rezoning, it simply means that the Assembly hasn't provided the Minister with sufficient fields to realise the policy intent that the Assembly has approved. And that's a political problem for the Minister and an issue for members to consider when they decide whether or not to approve the plan as a whole.
So,
I hope that answers your question, Constable.
it does answer my question, but surely we couldn't approve a plan that doesn't make sense.
Well, I'm not sure. That's exactly what you just said. Yes, well, that's what I've just said, I think.
Yeah.
Let's make them
It's stopped us before.
Yes, Senator Harlan.
Well, it strikes me we agree a lot of things that don't make sense, but on this occasion, sir, I'm not really referring to this. I just want to be absolutely clear. that if we were to approve the amendment of the Minister and then, as Constable Grouville said, not achieve that number of houses, that the plan would still proceed, and if approved by the Assembly, it would exist with the decisions we've made, notwithstanding this amendment had been overruled. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Adjournment, please, sir.
Adjournment proposed. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.